There we go. All right, go right ahead.
Well, I'm actually usually I'm from Montreal. That's where I've been throughout my time in the Truth Movement. But I'm actually for the last few months I've been staying in Ottawa, so not too far away, but still north of the border. So that's me. Yeah.
Are you and
Barry,
Sandra
where
on
are you?
Wait,
Oh,
real
sorry.
quick, is Craig on the opposite end of the Montreal island, or how?
Well, when Craig
yeah,
was in
kind of,
Montreal, no, when Craig was
I
in
was
Montreal,
kind of in the west end of kind of the city, and Sandra, you're kind of east, right?
okay, I'm very east, and you're kind of like west central.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's
Only
right.
someone without
so
a car
not,
would.
not that close together.
No, and now we're about 2 hours apart. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You guys have that underground mall together, I guess.
Well, it's a thing. I mean, you know, to us, the underground world of Montreal is so normal because we
Yeah.
live in it. But apparently, it's of interest to people who haven't seen something like that. And
Well, it's
Jean was
the
here,
largest
and then
underground city in the world. Is that not what they say? Like,
it's the biggest one. It is the biggest one. It's like 42
Yeah.
square kilometers, I think.
Wow.
yeah,
It's huge.
yeah.
But Al was asking me about it, and Jean was like, "Well, what do you mean you didn't show me the underground city when I was in Montreal?"
It's
Just hadn't occurred to me.
mostly just stores, though, right? It's not really that.
It's all stores. It's just
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
My sister lived in Montreal in high school because she was accepted at the Canadian Royal Ballet Company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she lived there for a couple of years, and I remember the underground mall when I went to visit her.
Mm.
You'll have to come back up.
I'd love to. I have
Yeah.
been back up there maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
With the kids and went to visit. It's a wonderful city.
Anytime, Susan. I got an extra bedroom upstairs.
Oh, well, I'll definitely have to plan on it.
Summer is a good time to visit.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and winter can be, can be cold. So
Winters
depending
are
on,
brutal.
yeah.
Never been so cold as I was in December in Montreal. Froze my unbelievable.
It's a humid cold, so
Yeah,
that makes it
comes
colder.
right up
Yeah.
the St. Lawrence River.
Yeah.
Barry, where are you now?
in Toronto.
Oh, you're in Toronto. Okay.
Yeah,
There's
and
more
I
Canadians on
don't-
this call.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't need to explain Toronto further. It's the center of the universe, obviously.
Right.
And that's why Montreal hates Toronto.
That's right. Actually, we could be broader than that. The entire country hates Toronto, right?
Right.
Fair enough.
'Cause-
Fair enough.
Oh
Yeah.
wow, half the call of Canadians then, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
More than half.
Wow.
Wow.
to
To a Bostonian, anything west of Worcester is no longer part of the country.
Oh, dear.
So you want to get started, sir? Let's
Let's
I
get
think we've
started.
got enough people here now that I see Ross is on the call. And Miles is out in Vancouver, another Canadian. Oh, my God.
Calgary.
oh,
No,
And Richard.
Calgary. And
Oh, boy.
I object to Toronto being the center of the universe.
Right.
Oh,
it's all right. Barry's outnumbered, so
yeah.
don't worry about it.
And the
We'll let
Leafs suck.
let the Canadians do all the talking tonight, I guess. So. Anyway,
Yeah.
why don't you get started, Craig? And I know you sent out a little bio, which you may want to just touch on, and then we can get into the nitty gritty.
Sure. I don't have it. I don't have the text in front of me, but I pretty much have it memorized, I guess. all the highlights anyway. Yeah, so basically I'm lived in Montreal since the 1960s. I went to school at York University in Toronto and got a film degree, and then actually then later on went back and got a graduate degree in journalism from Concordia in Montreal. And what else did I say in that? I have two blogs, one called Truth and Shadows that I've operated since 2010, which was murdered by Google and its algorithm, but it's still plugging away. But it's you have to kind of know it's there now, unlike the old days. And I started a new blog a few months ago called Thought Crimes and Misdemeanors, which is a Substack one. And there are certain advantages that come with, Substack, like mailing lists and things like that. Although that's what I thought when I created Truth and Shadows, I thought, it was great that they had the whole template there. You didn't need to have it hosted or anything. And then I found out years later how you can pay the price for that when WordPress decided that I didn't meet their community standards anymore, and they deleted my website. So maybe Substack will do that in a few years. I hope not, but I'll make a point of backing everything up like I did the first time. So, fingers crossed. But I'm not sure what else to tell you other than that. I've been a truther since 2010 when I started the blog, and I guess as you'll see in the presentation, which is primarily about the Pentagon, that's kind of been where I maybe put a large part of my focus. Although I write about subjects other than the 9/11 sometimes, different false flags and things like that. But it has kind of been an area of study, and I'm going to make the case tonight. You may regret after, having invited me after this, but I'm going to make the case tonight that there's some bad stuff going on in the truth movement, and using the Pentagon issue to divide the movement and really an effort to try to disqualify the Pentagon evidence, which I've got a slide presentation, so I'm gonna bring those up in a second. But basically the bottom line is you're gonna see in one of my early slides is that the Pentagon issue is so important because it really is the only area where we can, by showing the falseness of the official story, it's the only way we can prove with certainty government complicity in this operation. I mean, you can always, we pretty much know that there's insider complicity in all aspects of 9/11. But I have a friend of mine that went with me to see Richard Gage speak a few years ago in Montreal, and he came out of it convinced. You remember this one, Sandra? That's the McGill event, I think, that we both were at. So he came out of it saying, "Yeah, I'm convinced. It's definitely a controlled demolition." So I said, "Well, so you agree then that it was like an inside job?" And he said, "Well, not necessarily. It could have, it could have been terrorists that put, And I was like, so the Pentagon's important, more than important. It's essential, because if you can show, and I think we can, that a plane crash was faked at the Pentagon, then you have proven government complicity. But anyway, so now what do I have to do? Do I just hit share screen? Do you need to do anything to?
I've allowed share screen so that if you just click on
share screen, the green thing
you want, you can share screen. Go ahead.
Craig, you also chair the Deep State Crimes Call, I believe, too.
Yeah, I'm one of the I'm a co-facilitator with Cheryl Curtis. So she kind of runs the calls. She kind of moderates the calls, and I send out the agenda. And yeah, I should have mentioned that, I guess. I send out the agenda, and we kind of, collaborate trying to find speakers. And and organize that. Yeah, we just switched. I hope you'll all come and join us on some of those calls, because we just switched to Zoom. We've just joined the 21st century a couple months ago. So now so our calls are the last Wednesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern, and our next one's on the 27th of December. So if anybody, I mean, we have a big mailing list, and I know some of you are on it. Actually, maybe most of you are on it. But if anybody would like to be added, please just let me know, and all I have to do is put your email in there, and you'll get all the agenda and the video recordings. You'll just get those, anytime they're sent out. So yes, so that's it. So now I'm just got to do the screen sharing thing here, and now okay, I want to make sure I've got the right thing here. Is it this one? I think so. I think this is it. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Now, if I do this full screen, do you still see me, like in the corner, or? Okay.
Yep.
Side, you're
Yep.
good.
Okay. All right. So this is my little title thing there, which is sort of self-explanatory. So we'll see how this goes, whether I read everything or whether I might skip ahead. I've got I have a bunch of slides that deal with Lloyd England, and I really think, honestly, I think that merits its own presentation. I may have to, just in the interest of time, I may have to kind of skip over, that part of it, somewhat quickly. We'll see, I guess. You guys will let me know if if you need me to wind things up. So I have no shortage of material here. So, but the Lloyd England thing is very, very important, and it's very revealing. So anyway, as I say on this slide, there's two things I want to touch on. I don't know if it really divides into halves. I think the COINTELPRO part of it is a smaller chunk, but basically that's what I'm going to talk about. The fact that the Pentagon's been used really to undermine the movement, and the first part is just kind of an overview of the Pentagon evidence, and some of the things that probably some of you will have seen some of this before, and maybe some of you there'll be some details that will be new to you. We'll find out. Okay, so here you can see this is just one of the photos of the facade before it came down, and it was nicely obliterated by the foam or whatever they're spraying. So it made it difficult for people to really see the size of the hole. But you'll see in a moment, I've got a composite image that has been sort of accepted by, I guess, all sides in the movement, as far as I know, as being a fair representation of the of what the facade would have looked like had there been nothing blocking the view. Now, in fact, speak of the devil, there it is. You can see that there's some images have been combined here, but this is basically the opening in the building. This is the damage that we're talking about here. And you can see, I mean, this is the suggestion that that a 757 entered through this hole. I would say it's not just unlikely, it's ridiculous would be the word I would use. Absurd to suggest that an airplane entered through there. You can see the hole on the second floor. There's a column still hanging down. It's obviously severed at the bottom, but right in the center of that opening where the top of the fuselage is supposed to have entered, that's column 14. And you can see there are a number of, on the first floor, you can see there are a number of columns that are still hanging, or they may be, in most cases, I guess they're severed at the bottom, but they're still intact. And what the story that we're being told not only by the official story, but by the proponents of an impact in the truth movement. I mean, frankly, their account is almost identical to the official story anyway. But they, you know, they talk about the damage to the second floor, you know, being caused by the right wing. But the question I would ask, and if the right wing, you know, if most of the impact took place on the second floor, then what, you know, what caused the damage to the first floor that would be under the right wing? I don't think anyone's accounted for that yet. So let's move on. Now, this is, you know, an image that shows an almost pristine lawn. And I know what some people are going to say, yeah, but there's other views that show, you know, much more debris on the lawn. So we'll get to that. But the important thing to note here is that we're looking at an image that was done very early on, because, you know, unless I'm mistaken, you know, that's before the wall came down. That section of wall collapsed, or was brought down with an explosive. However, it came down. Yeah, that happened about 10 after 10 on that morning. So we're looking at a very early shot. So, you know, it seems to me, and I guess we'd have to look at all the photographs. You know, it seems like little pieces of what are supposed to be plane debris seem to appear, and maybe they weren't there at the beginning, and maybe they just appeared, or, you know, obviously were planted there. That would be my assertion. But I mean, you know, I haven't really made a comparison between exactly when one photograph was taken and when another was. But I would think that, you know, we're looking at the first half hour after this event. I don't think they cleaned up the lawn in that half hour, and why would they? Now, so again, here I make the case, or the point here that I think I already made that it proves government complicity. That's why it is so important. And this is something I want to say: the burden of proof. The group within the movement that keeps pushing a 757 impact, and particularly Wayne Costi is great for this. They want the burden of proof on the truth movement. They want us to prove how all the damage happened. And if we can't do that, they think we have to then revert to, you know, back to the default position, which is essentially the government's position. I don't agree with that. I think the burden of proof should be on the government to prove that a 757 hit the building, not on us to prove that it didn't. Although we can prove it did. We can prove it didn't. Now, I want to bring up citizen investigation team. You know, you'll hear some more about them throughout this. Basically, it was a duo, Aldo Marquis and Craig Ranke, they're from California. They went to Washington, and they went around and did a bunch of interviews, and they did them on camera. And they were not little clips or little sound bites. They were long interviews, and you can see exactly what was asked. You can see in these interviews, they explained exactly where the plane was, where they were standing, where it went by, and they drew on an aerial photograph exactly where they saw the plane go. And these people saw the plane go to the north of the Citgo gas station. And the reason that's important, and maybe a couple may have said that it went over the gas station, but the official flight path, which is supported by the government and by David Chandler, Wayne Costi, and the rest of their group, you know, for the damage to have been caused by a 757, the plane had to be entirely to the south of the Navy Annex building, and you'll see in a moment. We'll get to some images. Well, here we go. Okay, so you see in the foreground of this image, you see the Citgo gas station. The red line is the alleged official flight path, and the yellow little marks are the 5 light poles. So, you know, the path has to be very, very close to exactly this in order for all those poles to have been hit. The blue line represents, you know, an example of, you know, several people who are interviewed gave a sort of similar to this. Most of them described the plane banking to the right, which is interesting because the official story requires that the plane fly dead straight towards the building. And yet several witnesses described not only did it go over the Arlington Cemetery, which is to the north of the gas station, like this picture would have been taken probably from the roof of the Navy Annex. So you're looking, so it would have to be to the right of that building to be the official story. And to the left, the reason that this flight path issue is so critical is that if the plane was north of the gas station or anywhere north of the official flight path, then none of the damage could have been caused by a plane, and that blows the official story out of the water. So let's go now. Here's an overhead. The green line again is the official story path. One of the things that that's the Navy Annex, that sort of white rectangular building with all the different wings. Just below that, if you look straight down, you'll see. Well, I'm not sure if it shows very well on this, but there's a tower, the Virginia Department of Transportation tower, that's something like 200 feet high, and it's directly in the flight path, the official flight path. So the plane would have to have been above that to clear it. Now the Chandler Costi and company have tried to come up with a way around that, literally, by having the plane go beside on either side, and I'll show you a couple of graphics about that in a moment. So those yellow lines are examples of different witnesses that CIT interviewed and what they drew on their overhead photograph, and you can see how there's a number of them that show the plane banking to the right. Now, here's an example. A lot of people throw around they say, oh, there's so many witnesses that saw the plane at the building, like 100 witnesses to 180 witnesses, all this stuff. Well, here's just one example of somebody who was considered to be an impact witness. But when Aldo Marquis interviewed him, he admits he didn't actually see the plane hit the building. And there are lots of witnesses like that. So you really need to go through the specifics of the witness accounts and sort of find out where they were and when they were there and these sorts of things. You can't just take a number and say, oh, there's a whole bunch more witnesses to an impact. The number doesn't make it true. It's in the details.
I'd like to inject something for 1 second, if I can.
Okay, sure.
The credibility of witnesses has a lot to do with what the sources, whether these witnesses were part of the chosen few to share with the news media on the day. So there's a lot of manipulation around witnesses, right. Credibility.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There were a bunch of witnesses that had connections to the Gannett newspaper chain and USA Today in particular, who happened to be in traffic kind of at the right time, and they all reinforced the official story. So there's the media people that did it, and then there's all kinds of people that either worked for the Pentagon or they had connections to arms manufacturers, or they had some insider connections, which would make them not credible. And there's a great an analysis of the witnesses done by a guy who went under the name One Slice Short, and he I don't think that was his real name, but anyway, he basically boiled it. What's that?
He was a loafer.
Right. You made me think there for a second. So anyway, he basically boils it down to 41 witnesses that could have actually seen the plane hit the building and who didn't have, insider connections or media connections. But, just because those people could have seen that doesn't mean they did. The other thing to point out is if in fact the plane did fly over the building, as CIT asserts, then it's entirely, the whole thing would have been designed to fool people. So just because somebody says, "Oh, I saw it hit the building," it flew right towards the building and there was a big explosion, that doesn't mean that they actually saw an impact. It may mean that they were fooled into thinking that that's what they saw. So, are you good, Lawrence? Did you?
Oh, absolutely, Craig. You're good.
Okay, great.
We're totally concurrent.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, it's early yet, Lawrence. It's early
I
yet.
know
We'll see.
we've had our differences, so and you know what my focus is, and it's right there.
I do, and I, good for you for having your focus. It's good that there's something to be said for specializing, I think, because then you really get to know one part of it and you can share that with everybody. Anyway, here's an example. This is from Ken Jenkins' film, the video he did, the Pentagon plane puzzle. It's the first one, unless they've changed it, but the first time I watched it, it was the very first one. And first of all, we don't even get a last name. It's just somebody named Janet. And she's, you saw the plane crash. Yeah, I saw it. It just disappeared out of my sight and there was a big explosion. So who knows how many people, Mike Walter from USA Today admitted that the plane, yeah, I saw it for sure. And then in another interview, he says, well, it went behind some trees and then I saw a big fireball. So there's that. Now, here is one of the two Pentagon police officers who were at the Citgo gas station. They were separate. They weren't there together. They didn't talk about this until years later when CIT interviewed them together. But this is William Lagacy, and he, you can see, he describes, this is where I considered trying to do video clips, but anyway, I didn't quite get that ambitious tonight. But I would urge you to watch CIT's film National Security Alert, because there are interviews with this guy Lagacy, and the other officer's name is Chadwick Brooks. And Lagacy describes, it's very explicit. There's no question that he saw the plane, or that he's describing the plane going by on the north, to the north. It's over the cemetery, which is to the north. And in fact, if the plane had been on the official flight path, it would have disappeared from his view, because the canopy of the gas station would have blocked him from seeing it as it went by. So there's absolutely no question that this is what he's describing. And he says in the interview that he's 100% certain that this is what he saw. And you can see in this image here, see that black line? That's his drawing of the flight path. And you see I've circled the gas station. So he's putting it, he's not showing it banking to the right like some of the other ones did, but he's showing it clearly to the north. So that's that. Now here's just an example. This is Edward Paik, who couldn't even see the Pentagon, but he put the plane over the Navy annex. Chadwick Brooks basically said the same thing as Lagacy. He was also 100% certain. And Robert Turcios, all these people are on video. Turcios, and we're going to show what Wayne Costi does with Robert Turcios. We'll get there when we get there, but it's one of the most stunning examples of dishonesty in the movement that I've ever seen. And I'll explain that. So, right. So they're on camera. They're transparent. They go into it in detail. They often ask the question several times just to make sure that they've got the answer correct from the person being interviewed. And they've been attacked for this. There've been all kinds of claims made that they're leading the witnesses and all this, and it's quite wrong. Interviewing, Barry and I both have journalism backgrounds, and while maybe interviewing witnesses to a crime is maybe not the thing that we both did the most, but certainly I watched the interviews, CIT interviews. They're not perfect, but I think the information that they extracted is correct, and they, I think, deserve an enormous thank you from the Truth Movement for doing what they did, because they really have given us some of the best evidence that we have, which is why it's so curious that it's being it's being attacked by people who claim to be part of the movement. So, all right. Now I'm just looking at this. So, okay, I've already said that. So the government story can't be true if these people are telling the truth. And the chances that these people, even though there aren't, 200 of them, even though we're talking about a couple of dozen people, or between a dozen and 2 dozen, the fact that the chances that they would all tell the same false story in the same way, people that didn't even know each other, some of them didn't even have any connection at all to each other. The idea that they would all tell the same false story is, to me, is just a strange credulity beyond the breaking point. And now here's a quote from Massimo Mazzucco, who we all know did the September 11th New Pearl Harbor. You can read that for yourself. The work that Craig Ranke and Aldo Marquis of CIT have done on the witnesses for the North Path is some of the most solid, irrefutable evidence that one could ever assemble on 9/11, period. And I think Mr. Mazzucco is a very credible 9/11 researcher. Now, let's go to the crash scene. Now, this is, there's a gentleman named Adam Eisenberg who I've gotten to know quite well in the last couple of years. He was on the site. He was assigned there. He arrived in the evening of 9/11. And so he, at different times, was even in charge of guarding some of the evidence, and the crash scene. And I'll give you the quote here. He says, "I never saw anything that looked like a part from a Boeing 757. The damage I witnessed inside and outside the building wasn't consistent with anything that looked like a commercial airline crash had occurred. I never saw bodies that appeared to be victims of a plane crash, or, sorry, my captions are blocking that, or effects like luggage or personal items." I don't know if I got those words right, but so there's that. Now, this is that's a composite image there. So this is not, it's not like an actual picture of the plane or anything. But you can see this is, you can see how big a plane would be. And Mazzucco in his film, by the way, makes the point that while the wingspan of a 757 is 125 feet, if it's coming in at the angle that it did, it would actually take about 160 feet for it to entirely enter the facade of the building. And you can see by this image, even though it's not an actual image, how unlikely that would be. And here's this is a point. I mean, this image is just one that I just found, but it's this is a point that I think is important to make. The official story asks us to believe that this aluminum plane, the wings to this plane, hit 5 light poles going 530 miles per hour. And there's more to say about that in the Lloyd England part, but the idea that they would all just fall over after being hit, and 4 out of the 5 actually just kind of ended up right beside their base. So, where did all that kinetic energy go to? It just doesn't make any sense.
Where did you get that image?
Sorry?
Where did you get that image?
Oh, the image, I mean, the image is not really meant to be, a scientific representation of anything. I just got it. I just saw this on Facebook, and I just thought it would illustrate the point, but it's not, it's not meant to be taken as any kind of evidence on its own.
Okay.
It just, I mean, there are other ones there are other examples, like there's one that's like an old test film where they have an airliner, they're crashing airliner, I guess and there's like a wooden telephone pole in the way, and the wooden telephone pole just slices the wing right off. And that plane's not going nearly as fast. So, I guess I'm just making the suggestion that it's very unlikely. So you just take that picture as kind of an illustration. Now, This is a big subject in itself. The NTSB simulation, which was based on data on the flight data recorder. Yeah, what would we do without the Chandler Costi group? They're always riding to the rescue of the official story, and they say that they decoded the software the software from the flight data recorder, and that it actually shows it hitting the building. But they also say that in fact that's only when they corrected for data drift. So that's a whole subject that I think needs more study. But it's very odd to think that the government, if the plane really was flight data recorder really did show it on the official flight path hitting the building, why would the National Transportation Safety Board put out an animation based on the flight data recorder that essentially shows it north of the Citgo gas station and too high to hit the building?
Craig, I have a comment I'd like to make regarding this.
Yep, sure.
Pilots for 9/11 Truth did a pretty good study.
Yeah,
Part
this
of
is
that-
based pretty much on their work. Yeah.
Right. Now, they also, and part of that study stated that the snapback, the altimeter snapback, which should have occurred as the plane descended, did not occur, and that the flight deck door had never been breached, which
Right.
completely shuts down any, as far as the use of that particular information, which was most likely a contrived or a manufactured, set of data points to describe what the plane was going to, except they forgot the flight deck door and they forgot
Right.
automatic snapback. So that's like two very heavy disclaimers.
So the snapback, what are the implications of that? Just to make sure I
There was
understand what
not-
you're
yeah,
saying.
This is something that occurs in flight as the aircraft descends.
Okay.
Just for local barometric
So
pressure.
that you're saying it even further supports the idea that the plane wasn't low enough or wasn't descending.
No,
Is
it
that right?
supports the fact that this data was contrived, that was made up.
Okay, got it. Super. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. Now this slide is borrowed from a PowerPoint that Xander Arena did, where he did a very in-depth study. I mean, it's mostly, over my head in terms of understanding how the sciences was done. But he did this for Richard Gage's conference, Pentagon conference, in March of 2022. And you see here, he has shown what we should have seen in the Pentagon video, the size that a real 757 would have been. And he's taken, he's compensated for the angle and all that stuff. And I would advocate, maybe I can get the link to you guys or whatever, but I would advocate, maybe watch, if you're into that stuff and you're able to understand it, then look at the PowerPoint, or maybe you might just want to watch him he's done different presentations on it on video. So, but it's very important. And it's interesting that, I noticed, I watched the David Chandler speaking to your group, I guess was recent. And he talked about the video, the Pentagon lawn, and how, the video proves that there was a plane. And yet he ignores this proof that Xander Arena has done. He hasn't refuted it. He's aware of it because this was unveiled at Richard Gage's conference. So it's kind of a bit typical. It's sort of like it's something that disproves his case, and he just ignores it and just pretends it's not there, hoping nobody will notice. So there we go. Now this again is the composite, and I don't know that I have to spend much time on this. I'll just point out where it says the number 2 there. That's the window. I mean, the tail section, had there been a real plane hitting there, the tail section would have gone well above that second floor hole and should have at least broken some windows. It's unbelievable that none of those windows are even broken. And you can see because the foam landed on there. All right, so I'm past that. And this is just kind of another photo. You can see up in the inset in the top right corner, you can get a bit of a look at at that column in the middle of the second floor opening. Wayne Costi makes a big deal of looking at that kind of from the side, and it's more angled in. And he thinks that indicates, an impact from a 757. I can't imagine a plane hitting that column and only bending it. It seems a little crazy to me, but all right. So now here's the so-called exit hole. I don't want to call it an exit hole because I don't think anything exited there. But this is supposed to have been made by the fuselage, or, and some people say, you know, the landing gear or something, but it's pretty roundish looking hole. And the interesting thing is, and I think I have a slide coming up on this, but if anything should have made an exit hole in the C-ring wall, it would have been the two engines, the two 8,000-pound Rolls-Royce engines. Those things, I mean, just think titanium engines, 8,000 pounds, traveling at 530 miles per hour. And once they enter the building, I mean, there's nothing in it. There's no exterior walls between there and this wall here. It's just like offices. So the idea that they would somehow not have emerged from the C-ring, into this, or out through the C-ring, and yet the fuselage or the landing gear would have, it just is absurd. I think Mizuko does a good thing, in his film about this, where one of the people he interviews describes it as being like, it would be like a missile. He doesn't mean literally a missile, but it would be like, there would have been no stopping either of those engines from continuing right through. And there's an example. There's what the engine would look like, new. So there, I made that point already. Now here's a picture. I'm sure you've probably all seen this one, but this is directly in the path of the plane, and there's a wooden stool with an open book sitting on it. I mean, it's, can anybody believe that would be where a plane would have just crashed? I mean, it's nuts in my opinion. And there's no, they didn't treat it like a crime scene. You got people walking around picking up, evidence. We don't even know who they are. Now this is a point that I don't hear a lot of, but I like to keep making it, is, this plane's supposed to have hit on the first floor. And yet there seems to be, little to no damage to the concrete foundation. And this is not the best angle, maybe. But like, look at this. Now that's directly, the plane would have gone right through there. Now, does anybody believe that a 90-ton jet going that speed is not going to do more damage than that to the concrete? And there's a kind of a farther back view of it. Now here, I put this in here to make it clear that there was debris of some kind on the lawn closer to the heliport and around the helipad. I think personally, my feeling is that it's material that was blown out of the building from internal explosions. That's what I think is the most likely. It's not a plane. It's not even a fiberglass drone. I mean, there's no way to see that as a plane, in my opinion. A lot of the pieces of alleged plane debris that we do see are just conveniently small enough that they can be carried around by an individual. And there's actually Adam Ruff, who's one of my co-researchers on this, has made a really, really good point. He figured out, looking at he calculated that on a 757, American Airlines 757, that the amount of space on the fuselage that would have had red lettering on it would be a very, very tiny percentage of the entire fuselage. And yet all the pieces that seem to be found on the lawn, happen to have little bits of red lettering, which makes it look like it came from a plane. Why don't we have tons and tons of pieces that are just silver with no lettering? It seems, beyond suspicious. And there's again another shot of, there's tree branches, and it doesn't look like any evidence of a plane whatsoever. This is, Wayne Costi describes this as a large piece of the plane, but that could be picked up by one person, I think. I mean, it's just kind of zoomed in picture, so it makes it look a bit bigger than it is, but it's not very big. And again, it's got the lettering, so there you go. All right, so that's just a little summary of what I've said in this section. So I'm going to I think I have to exit because I've got this in three different documents here. Because this is okay, how do I do this now? How do I do this?
Real quick, Craig, before you exit out of that one, could you go back to that first graphic where you show the north flight path and the south flight path? There was a red and a blue line.
Sure. Let's see. Let's find that.
Like the third or fourth one. Yes.
That one?
Yes. This just dawned on me. I was talking with Sandra like 3 weeks ago. That I take no position at the Pentagon. I know that annoys some people, and I know we've had our differences in the past, but you're doing a great presentation now. Just want to say that.
Thank you.
The north flight path, the blue path, that really looks like it could line up with runway 15 of Reagan International Airport. Have you ever considered that idea?
Yes, I have for sure. I mean, I don't have any, we don't have anybody that says they saw it landing on the runway there, but to me, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. I mean, if the plane was able to stay very low and almost hit the top of the wall, then you get this big explosion with all the smoke. It would be a second or two later, theoretically, if everything lined up, properly. And I'm not sure I really sort of looked to see exactly how the direction how perfectly that would work.
Well,
but I mean, if I were doing it, I think I'd want to land the plane right there at Reagan International.
If you don't mind me sharing my screen real quick, I did line it up real quick. I just have it on maps. I could show it.
Okay.
I don't know. Did that come through? People see me?
Craig has to stop share for you to share.
Okay. Stop share. Okay.
Whoop, then what happened to mine? Where'd you guys go? Oh, there we go.
It's there.
Okay. So let me zoom out. Why do I have pencil mode? Escape. I'm drawing somehow. I'm in the annotation.
Happy face.
There we go. Okay. So here's the Pentagon. The path, basically what he's saying is it rounded right here and it's headed down this way. Well, it just so happens if you would round and continue in, this lens up on runway 15 / it would be 33 if you're coming from the other direction. I did put a FOIA request in and they said that that's outside of the indexes of the Department of Justice, but that's a reasonable flight path there, I think. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, I know what some others might say. They might say in order to make that turn, that it would be too sharp a turn, or so that's maybe an issue with it, but
yeah. Thank you.
But
that's
certainly
The official story of Hani Hanjour's turn.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what a joke. I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, why would you? I mean, even if you you had a real pilot that really was going to fly the plane into the building, and it wasn't Hani Hanjour, there's no reason you would take the path of the official story. First of all, I mean, you'd be risking all kinds of things happening, all kinds of, I mean, why would you fly into 5 light poles on purpose? It makes no sense. As has been, the point's been made many times over the years, and I think first time I heard this was in one of David Ray Griffin's books, is that, the Pentagon it's a 30-acre footprint, and it would be very easy to fly into the roof of the Pentagon. The reason maybe not to do that would be that the people, working in the Pentagon knew this was happening and were responsible for it. So they wanted to make sure, and and that part that was allegedly hit, of course, was being renovated, and that's pretty convenient as well. So anyway, so that, yeah. So is that good, Gene?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so now I need to go. This actually gives me an opportunity to switch. Now I have my Lloyd England stuff, but I also have my Truth Movement stuff. So maybe what I'll do is that I'll do the Truth Movement stuff, and then I'll come back to Lloyd England. Even though I'm sort of bouncing, from evidence to, the other thing. And anyway, but we'll see how it goes. So that's that. Now, okay, now how do I get back to sharing my screen? Hold on.
While you're doing
Gotta
that,
do that first.
have you heard back from Craig Ranke or Aldo Marquis? Like, what have they been up to in all these years?
I don't. Craig Ranke doesn't have any particular interest in communicating with me for whatever reason. I can only imagine. So yeah, we're not buddies or anything. I have spoken to Aldo, and he's still interested, and he's I think he's kind of done he's provided all the research that I guess he has to share, but he's still involved and still interested. And I hope we'll be able to get some input from him in the future. I don't expect that from Craig Ranke, but who knows? He's moved on to other things, and I can only speculate about that. So all right, now back to sharing my screen, and let's see. Okay, so here we go. Boy, I must be talking too loud. I'm starting to get a sore throat from talking here.
Well,
I'm not
your
used to doing
audio
this.
is just fine if you want to scale it down a little bit for comfort.
Well, yeah, maybe I'm concerned because I'm not using an external microphone. I'm just relying on my laptop. So maybe I'm overcompensating for that. Okay, now here's where we'll see if you still like me in a couple minutes, Gene. So my contention, and I'm quite prepared to defend it, is that there is a COINTELPRO operation that has been it has infiltrated the movement going back at least 15 years, and it continues to this day. And the focus of its attention is the Pentagon, and they're even they've even had rumblings of wanting to move into the Shanksville area. I'm hoping that that's been headed off. But anyway, let's have a look at some of the stuff that I would like you all to be aware of. And I'll try to make it clear that I'm not interested in personal attacks. People think that if you really kind of go after somebody or call somebody out, that's the same thing as a personal attack. It's not. I don't care about these people personally. I don't know them. I care about what they do in the movement and the damage that they do. And I guess it's up to me to, make the case that this is, what's actually happening.
Craig, could you define COINTELPRO for the listening audience,
well,
please?
Sure. It's a kind of condensed from the term counterintelligence program, and it was a United States government program that was that infiltrated all kinds of groups, and it did played sort of dirty tricks on different people like Martin Luther King, and it was infiltration and surveillance and disruption, and the program's supposed to have ended in 1971, I think, but it obviously some form of that continues to this day. Maybe they don't call it COINTELPRO, maybe they call it something else. So I'm taking a license in the sense that I'm giving it that name, but you can just substitute an infiltration, which, I mean, whatever it is, it's made up of people who are using deception and pretending to be honest truthers, but they're not behaving like honest truthers. And the proof is in the pudding, I think. And I'll show you some examples. So more than 15 years. Now this group, I've heard of them as the cabal, and some people don't like that term, but I think they actually perfectly fit the definition of a cabal. They pretended for years not to even be a group, and I noticed how often they would recommend each other's work. You know, David Chandler would say, "Oh, you should check out Ken Jenkins' new paper," as if he just stumbled over it. And, you know, then Jenkins would recommend Frank Legg, and they would kind of play this kind of game. And I came out very early on and I said, these people are obviously working as a coordinated group. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with being a group. You know, I've been part of groups. So there's not a problem being a group. But if you're lying about it, that's a problem. And it took until 2016 before they admitted, when they put out a 96-page paper kind of going after Barbara Honegger's research, and that's when they kind of said, well, okay, so we're a group, so what of it, you know? It's the dishonesty that was the problem with that, not the fact that they work as a group. But you know what? I'll say this, like, I've worked with people like Barry, and I notice Adam Eisenberg has joined the call, so I work with Adam too. But it doesn't mean, because you work with somebody on a particular issue, it doesn't mean that you agree with every single thing about every issue and you're all in lockstep. With this group, I never see them disagree about practically anything to do with the Pentagon. And if there is a point where they have there's a difference, wait a couple of weeks and that difference will be gone. Now, okay. So basically they will, they treat every piece of evidence that the government offers as being completely authentic. The radar, what they claim the flight data recorder says, you know, pretty much everything. The DNA evidence, and I know David Chandler talked to you about that. You know, he kind of mocks the idea that, you know, that they would actually plant evidence, which I think is, of course they'd plant evidence. I mean, you know, the whole thing was a deception. But anyway, now, so I mentioned the CIT, what was important about them. And it's the relentless attacks on CIT over so many years. We're talking like 17 years of attacks on CIT. They haven't even been active for a decade now. And yet they're still being attacked. And I just, you know, throw a few names in there, but believe me, I can name others, and I'm happy to do so. And when I use the word lie, I don't use that loosely. Gross distortion is an understatement, and some of them are just outright lies. And I'm, you know, happy to chronicle those. So they seem to, So this, what they've succeeded in doing is they've succeeded in getting a lot of the truth movement to just abandon the Pentagon evidence. You know, in other words, people, I hear this all the time. Oh, it's just too divisive. It's too controversial. You know, we have enough with Building 7. And, you know, I'm a big fan of the evidence, you know, concerning Building 7 and the towers. And I've done a lot of work on that too. But my position has always been, because of how I became convinced about 9/11, it was the cumulative evidence. It was the weight of the whole case. And a lot of this came from reading David Ray Griffin's books. He doesn't just talk about one thing. He goes into all of it. And so it's the weight of all the evidence that makes it kind of irrefutable, I think. And so I think when people say, oh, all we need is this one piece, this is clear, we don't need anything else, I don't see it that way. I think we need all of it, so that there's just no way that it can be denied. Now, and this is the point I make here, it's people say that it's divisive. For what I do is divisive. I hear this all the time. And, you know, I'm the messenger as far as I'm concerned. it's what those people are doing that is divisive. It's not what I'm doing. I'm just calling them out. I'm exposing them. And the idea of unity, and this is, I know Sandra and I don't agree on this, but when you have people that are dishonest, trying to have unity with them is going to be fruitless, because you have, like, David Ray Griffin in 2011, when he came out with his consensus approach, his idea was, well, there's so much we disagree on. Let's just focus on what we agree on, that it wasn't Al-Qaeda flying the plane. Well, that was a terrible mistake, in my opinion, and it really got us nowhere. It was just a sort of enabling thing for this cabal to gain prominence. I think it was a big mistake. Griffin's books showed very well why a plane didn't hit the Pentagon, in addition to what CIT did. But unfortunately, he decided that he wanted to appease this group and just focus on whether Al-Qaeda flew the plane after 2011. David Chandler has been vicious in his attacks on CIT. This quote that I have here is from the paper he did with Jonathan Cole, which basically suggested that CIT were agents, and that this idea of a plane not hitting was a planted theory that was put in there just to make the movement look foolish. And this is what their justification is always. Look, we'll look ridiculous if the media decides to focus on us, and they see that we think this, then we'll look ridiculous. I think we should look at the evidence, and that's what I think. We should determine things. Now, this is just a screenshot from a Facebook comment that I think is pretty revealing. He says here, their methodology, talking about CIT, was clearly designed to be deceptive. Now, there's no basis for that. There's no basis for that. Furthermore, their abuse of Lloyd England is debunked. Well, that doesn't even make sense. By Wayne Costy's analysis. Wayne Costy's analysis of the Lloyd England thing is a fraud, and he didn't debunk anything. Chandler blatantly lies here. He says Lloyd never claimed the large pole piece was what hit his cab. Well, he claimed it numerous times, many times, and he knows that. He claimed it on camera, and I'm going to show you a screenshot where he's pointing right at the pole. So we'll see that. And then he ends it off with CIT is scum. He likes to play this sort of like he's the scientist, and other people are engaging in personal attacks. Well, what do you think of that? What do you think of that one? Now, Adam Fitzgerald, who is, he's really a bad actor, who seems to be part of this effort, did this post on Facebook where he gave a list of people he considers to be agents. Some of them, would be more problematic figures, I guess, in the movement than the ones I've named. But he included Barbara Honegger, Dylan Avery, who's just done 2 films for Architects and Engineers over the last few years, and Christopher Boleyn. And Chandler's response was good list. So he just basically called those 3 people agents. Here's Wayne Costy. This just goes, I'm just making this point to show you that their image of just being scientists, and they try to paint people that criticize them as being, engaging in ad hominem attacks. Well, let's look at some of these here. Mizuko's incompetent. Honegger's a horrible researcher. And my favorite, David Ray Griffin, is not a real researcher if he doesn't watch PowerPoint. And that obviously that quote comes from it might be a couple of years ago now. So obviously David was still with us at the time. But to suggest that, that speaks for itself. And he says about CIT, that he is livid. There's nothing sincere in this man. So, this is all performance. Livid because of CIT's obvious deceit and treachery. Well, that's an example of projection if I've ever seen any. So I'm going to move on here. So, well, you can see that. That's self-explanatory. it's the evidence that's even worse than the personal attacks, and we're going to get to that. Now, here's Frank Legg, who's now deceased, but he actually, in one of his papers, actually tried to make the case that the reason we didn't see a lot of debris on the lawn was because it was hidden within the texture of the lawn. I mean, how much of an idiot does he think people are? Honestly, hidden within the. So I guess they hadn't cut the grass that week, I guess. So that's Frank Legg. Now here's something I think is interesting. This is I'm comparing two quotes, one from Popular Mechanics' James Miggs, who obviously did the hit piece against the truth movement, the article and then the entire book. And look at the similarity between his explanation for the Pentagon and what David Chandler says right below. It's uncanny. It's, you know, it doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it's just interesting, I think. Is everybody, can I move to the next slide? Has everyone read that?
Yeah.
Okay, I know it's a little bit, yeah. Now here's Wayne Costi. This one absolutely blew me away. The quote from the video, Eye of the Storm, you can see the quote at the bottom, is Craig Ranke, and he is saying basically, some people think that maybe the pole itself wasn't what speared the windshield. So he's saying some people think it wasn't the main base of pole number one, but rather a part of maybe, you know, one of the other poles. So what does Costi do? And you can still see this today on this. He created a whole website to mock me, which you know, very flattering. But the part in gold is the part he cut out of the quote, and he just started with like an ellipsis and a capital W, and it makes it sound like Ranke is saying, well, maybe the pole isn't what speared the windshield, right? So he's making it seem like Costi is saying the opposite of what he's actually saying. This is just beyond the pale as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and you know, he's even engaged with me in Facebook comments where I've pointed this out, and he doesn't even respond to it. You know, he'll just come back at me with, well, oh yeah, explain what happened to column 18 and what caused the damage. So he doesn't even defend this. It's indefensible. Now here's another thing, and I noticed this from being on the teleconference, because Wayne, you know, used to be part of that before he was kicked out for lying, which is a whole story, but we won't get into that tonight. But he used to make these regular presentations, and I counted 5 different flight paths that he came up with for the plane, all of which he claims perfectly line up with the damage, which is really amazing. You can see on this one, you can see the little blue dot, the VDOT tower. He moves the flight path to the left of that, to the north of that, and it goes right over the Navy Annex building. It's actually a north path. That would actually be north of the official flight path. And then because they've got to find a way to get around that tower. Because that kind of gives away the game. Now look at the next, he comes up with another flight path. And this is one of his slides taken right. Now you see the Navy Annex now. Now you see the flight path is magically moved to the south of the VDOT tower. And yet magically it still lines up with all the damage according to Wayne Costi. So I mean, I'll give him credit for having graphics skills anyway. You know, that he can make completely different flight paths all manage to line up. I mean, it's quite fraudulent, really. So I'm going to move on if that's okay with everybody to that one. Now we get into some really bad stuff. I mean, Lloyd England, we'll get to Lloyd England in a minute, but William Lagacy, and I think he's the one I'm going to talk. Yeah, so I'll read this. In National Security Alert, Lagacy describes in great detail how he saw the plane on the north side of the Citgo gas station. Chandler ignores his account, claiming that Lagacy got confused when he said that he could see the starboard side of the plane and that he really meant port. Lagacy, who would qualify as an expert witness, stated that he is 100% sure the plane was north of the station. In fact, if the plane had been on the south path, his view of it would have been obscured. Now, you'd have to read the details of what Sandler is claiming, but because in one of his other accounts, Lagasse referred to the cockpit, the way the cockpit hit the wall of the Pentagon, that means that it could only have been, and I don't have the text in front of me, but basically he's basically saying, well, the only way that could be true is if it was on to the south of Lagasse. So therefore, when he said starboard, he got mixed up. I think that's really almost insulting to people that he's. I mean, you watch National Security Alert. It's not like a 10-minute interview where Lagasse is, or Lagasse. I guess it's pronounced Lagasse. Yeah. Up here, it would be different in French up here, but so Lagasse, right? So
real quick, Sandra and I did call William Lagasse, I think it was 2 years ago, and he basically says that he stood by what he originally said, and then finally told us, if you want to speak to me further, get permission through the whatever organization is through the Pentagon, and then they never give permission, so he doesn't have to speak to you. But he says, I stand by my original statements.
Well, that makes sense, because he's very clear about it in the video. I mean,
but Craig,
yeah,
Craig, I mean,
yes.
And I just need to play devil's advocate, because I like to address those things that people say that sometimes the other side makes a certain point, which I feel at least needs to be addressed. And one of them is the fact, and you and David do this cherry picking thing sometimes with the testimony, because Chandler loves Lagasse because Lagasse does say that he saw the plane hit the building, and
right.
you just
well, a lot
said
of them
yourself
do, yeah.
A minute ago, right? So how do you I mean, how do you pick and choose what part of what he's saying is the one that you're going to run with, and the valid one, and the one where he's not mistaken?
Well, okay, that's a fair question. And it would be great if we'd had that video clip to show. I would think if you were standing on your street where you live, and a plane flew over your head at 100 feet above the ground, and it was on one side of the building you live in, it's very unlikely, I think, that you would then later say, oh no, it was on the other side of the building. It was on the, if it flew right over your head. I do
agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. And when you're talking about, first of all, if this is as I think it was, I think it's a deception. It's meant to fool people into thinking that the plane hit the building. First of all, his view of the building wasn't very good. I mean, the building, it's not easy to see it from the gas station. There's a mound, there's sort of an embankment. You can just see the building, but if the plane's going right at the building and then there's a big explosion and all smoke, and of course you're going to think the plane hit the building. Like,
and that's the argument that I always make anyway. It's very easy to connect those dots when you see a plane, and then you see, and nobody could have been that close to the Pentagon. He's still a distance away, right? And you already have the events of Ground Zero that just happened. So now you're at the Pentagon and there's a plane coming in. You're basically already expecting to see it hit the building. So in your mind, you're connecting these things. But the only reason I harp on Lagasse, and obviously he could be, he could be just as capable of connecting dots that aren't there. But, I mean, he's still being hauled out as an expert witness. He's not Joe Blow standing, on the corner of the street.
Exactly. Yes.
He's a police officer, and I'm sure he's trained in, observing things and whatnot. Right. So
yes,
I guess it just always bothered me that both sides pick this witness with the parts that are suited for them,
See, I have to object to that, Sandra, I have to object to your characterization, and I object to it when I've seen it in print, and I object to it when you do it in print too. You always like to make a false equivalency between, like, well, both sides, both sides are guilty of doing, something wrong or whatever, as if it's like a 50-50 toss-up, and it's not a 50-50 toss-up. I'm not cherry picking when I say that it is clear beyond any reasonable doubt that he's describing. I mean, he's standing at the gas station right beside the canopy of the gas station. He's pointing over at the trees in the
Yes,
Arlington.
it's very convincing, 100%. Yes.
Arlington Cemetery, and he's explaining where the plane went, and he's saying it went over there and then it hit the building, and he couldn't even see the plane if it was behind him. It would be blocked from his view. So to me, that vastly outweighs in terms of credibility the idea that in the distance, when the building is this big in his view, that that it hit the building. He's not the only one. Most of them thought it hit the building. The only one I think maybe you wouldn't include would be Edward Paik, who couldn't even see the Pentagon from where he was. So the flight path is absolutely critical. All those people, including Lagasse, they have to be completely wrong to an unbelievable degree to actually have gotten, seen it on the official flight path and gotten that mixed up, and then they really saw it hit the building. So instead of it being a 50-50 situation, to me, it's a 98-2 situation. And it's disingenuous of them.
Yeah, and so just let me say this. I just wanted it to be addressed. I'm with you. I think that the testimony he gave is extremely compelling. I agree with you with the, I said a long time ago how easily people can misperceive things, clouded by their judgment and stuff like that. But it just bothered me that it was never addressed. It's like the other argument was just done away with, and this is the only thing I'm looking at, right? But now, to hear you explain that, okay, to me, this is a lot more valid because, and the reason that's not valid because that's kind of what I felt needed to be said.
Good. I'm glad. Okay, then I'm glad you brought it up. I did want to sort of make the point that I don't think it's helpful to kind of, the term cherry picking, I guess I reacted a bit to that, because I don't think I'm cherry picking. I'm not focusing on the impact part of it, because I think it's kind of taken as for granted that people generally thought that it hit the building, and that was, it wouldn't be very good illusion or deception if nobody bought it. And when I think too, in terms of psychology, I think if you think you see an explosion, you see the plane looks near even if there's a hint in your mind, like, gee, did that really hit the building? If you then find out afterwards, everybody's telling you that it hit the building and there's wreckage and all that, that idea that any doubt you might have had, you're going to just, I got that wrong. And you're maybe even subconsciously, you'll just reject that impulse.
Well, kind of like a little bit like like the towers collapsing. How many people had a doubt when the towers collapsed and they said, well, that's kind of weird. But then the official story came in right away and said, this is what happened. And people went and said, oh, okay, well, I guess this is what happened. If there had been an immediate discussion about how did these towers come down, there would have been a dialogue, right away about what may have happened.
Well, I'm one of those people, because on the day of 9/11, I know Barry, he caught on to this right at the beginning, and I didn't. But on the day, the way the towers came down struck me as odd. But maybe at that point I just didn't know enough to connect those dots. But I knew there was something wrong with it.
Yeah.
So but I got convinced. So there's an example of it. All right. So let's move to the so it's not just I would say this goes beyond a disagreement between me and Chandler. Like, this is irresponsible at the very best. It's irresponsible, and at the worst, it's deliberately deceptive. to claim that, well, he got mixed up with starboard and port. I mean, really. Okay. Now there again is a sort of a close-up of Lagacy.
Craig, I just want to interrupt, because we do have an agenda following yours,
So, yeah.
and we don't want to allow for some question and answer after your
Okay.
speech. So I'm looking at maybe 5 minutes. Does that sound reasonable?
All right, I will zip. What I will do, I mean, I can't get in, obviously I can't deal with the Lloyd England details, but I mean, if you guys want to, if you're open for a Lloyd England presentation at some point in the future, I'd be happy to do that. I think
good.
it's worth it. So maybe rather than try to zip through that in a couple of minutes, I'll finish this portion of my slides, which are not going to take very long. And yeah, so we'll
Yeah,
get to the questions right.
we just want to allow for plenty of question and answer at the end of your presentation.
Yeah, and I look forward to those. I'm looking forward to those. So now Robert Tercios, I'll just say this quickly. This one is the one that takes the cake. You see in National Security Alert, Tercios is standing in the parking lot and he's explaining in the interview that, you remember what it looks like where the gas station is in relation to the Pentagon? He's describing the right wing of the plane going over the north end of the canopy of the gas station, if that makes sense. So it's the fuselage is completely to the north of the gas station, but the right wing is kind of going over the edge of the gas station. So then the left wing would be much more to the north. So he's describing this, and there's what Costi does is he takes, based on where Tercios is standing, he's pointing back towards the south at the canopy to say that's where the right wing was. So what does Costi do? You're going to see in a second what Costi does. Here's his slide. Now that red dot is where Tercios was standing. He tries to make it seem like, because he's pointing to the right towards the official path, that means that blue triangle is his line of view, and that indicates. So he describes Tercios as a south path witness, which is outrageous. It's outrageous, and it's a lie. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's a lie. And if he won't admit to it, and if Chandler and he won't admit to it, then, well, somebody should be holding them to account for that, because it's a flat out lie. So now let's just see what else I can get. Now here I want to finish off, and this is something that is based on observation, and you can ask me more if you want, of this of the maneuverings of this group over all the years that I've been around. I've watched them sort of, whenever somebody comes up with some evidence about the Pentagon, they target them and they try to talk them out of it, or then they attack them. Chandler tried to get me fired from Architects and Engineers. First, I was like a contractor. I was a volunteer originally. He spent 5 years trying to get me fired from there, because I think he thought that that would hurt my credibility, and therefore it'd be, my criticism of him would be reduced. But so they control not a scientist for 9/11 Truth, but they basically worked in different ways to control virtually every organization in the movement. And I think what's happening, you can see them listed there. I think what's happening with this new International Center for 9/11 Justice is they were unsuccessful at getting control of Architects and Engineers. Chandler wanted Scientists for 9/11 Truth to have a formal relationship with them, and that was turned down by AE. And so they have decided that they are now going to replace AE as kind of the centerpiece, I guess, of the movement. And that is something that is going on right now. And I think that's going to be very bad. I can't imagine any genuine truther would want to see AE damaged. But I would not, honestly, I would consider the International Center for 9/11 Justice, which basically is a combination of three entities that have spent most of the last decade trying to suppress the Pentagon evidence. And that includes the Consensus Panel, Journal for 9/11 Studies, and the, I'm drawing a blank on the third one now, the International Center for, what was the original one? International Center for 9/11 Studies. That was it.
And
So
Scientists for 9/11 Truth, right?
I think, was it? Okay. All right, I'll take your
I
word for
don't know.
that.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
I thought it was 11, I thought it was studies, but maybe not.
Journal for
Um,
9/11 Studies. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the journal, but also the International Center was anyway, these were basically three kind of entities that were basically not doing anything. And now they seem to be trying to replace AE, and that's a big subject, but that's what I think is happening. And this is disastrous if we allow this to happen. Let's just see. Yeah, so the infiltration has, has done enormous damage, and it really has. It has divided the movement. It has weakened the movement, and it has basically taken some of our strongest evidence off the table in the minds of many people. They just think, oh, we just don't want to deal with the Pentagon. And I think that's done deliberately. And I can give, I could give a lot more examples than this. And I think the Lloyd England evidence is even more clear than that. How they basically lie and say that England never said it was the long end of the pole and all that. It's quite deceptive. So anyway, I think that's the end. Yeah. So I'll stop right there, Susan. And I, if the other stuff comes up, the England stuff comes up in questions, then I'll deal with those, but I'll stop there.
So if anybody has any questions, we'd like to take them one at a time by raising your hand. So I saw two hands come up. It's easier for me to call on the electronic hand. Jean.
I would just beg that Craig would reconsider and submit to the debated topics forum his paper, kind of like he did in this first segment. Love the first segment. Just present your evidence and stick to your guns. I thought it was great. Please
Appreciate
consider that. Thank you.
Well, I'll just comment. I am considering that, and I'm being urged by both David Chandler and Wayne Costi to respond to them on that debated topics forum. I may do that, but honestly, I have a lot to think about with whether I want to give that organization any kind of credibility. I mean, they've already said, Ted Walter said on not this group, but in Gene's group, I believe, when he announced the thing, he said that they weren't accepting in the debated topics forum, they would accept papers there, but the Journal of 9/11 Studies won't even accept any more Pentagon papers. So you have to go in the debated. So it's kind of, to me, it's kind of a bit like,
Well, right now they're going to work with Lawrence on his how do I label it? Not this synthesis stuff. So
9/11
right.
stuff.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, I think nothing but good could come from it. And if they do become, attack you, then you have something to say. Look, well, there it is.
Well, I don't have a problem with being attacked. I'm fine with being attacked. I feel I have enough, behind what I'm saying that's not a problem.
I agree, but then you'd have proof.
Any organization, this will sound, people won't maybe not like this, but any organization that has David Chandler as a board member, I think is problematic at best. And I have to think about whether I want to lend any kind of, lend my own support to its existence by participating. I might do that, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dean.
I think my hand was next, if that's all right.
Go ahead, Susan,
Sure.
your turn.
All right. So the whole Pentagon issue, of course, is quite controversial in the
Supposedly.
and you know, a lot of people want to shy away from it because it's controversial and we want unity, blah blah blah. But one thing I didn't hear you address is why the Pentagon issue is important. And the way I look at it, I think Barbara Honegger has reiterated this. If it were just the two towers and Shanksville, we would not have gone to war. The Pentagon was the reason for war. So this is a very important issue to address. Even if it gives us the shivvies, you know, that we don't want to address it because it's divisive. I think we need to take the courage and address the issue head on. Because that's the whole reason for endless wars. The second thing is, I can't help being baffled. Why the official story? Why that South Path? Why? Why are they sticking with that? Am I missing something? What am I missing? It must be obvious, and I'm just being dense.
Let me help you with that, okay?
Okay.
The South Path is where the poles were down. That was evidence that was prepared. In order for the whole story to stick together, it had to be something that knocked the light poles down.
But that still doesn't add up to me. Why would they knock the light poles down? Why would they stick with that path?
Well, once they knocked the light poles down, they had no other choice
Why would they knock the light poles down?
to say this was the path when they
But
wanted.
you're now getting into a circular argument.
Absolutely circular argument. There's
Can,
no other way
can
to-
I have a shot at that, Susan?
Sure.
Please.
I'm arguing, and I think there's enormous evidence that when we say they, I mean, we're talking about the people that I've been talking about. We're not talking about the government. They are absolutely dishonestly putting this forward. So they are trying to avoid having this be the. You're talking about the importance of it, and you made a very good point about it. You know, this getting the Americans, the U.S. into war, and I agree with that. And I made the other point, which is that it's also important because it's the one thing that you couldn't possibly have an outside entity that could have, you know, staged the crime scene. It has to be the government. So if you nullify the Pentagon evidence, you're taking away that one thing that absolutely nails government involvement. So I think you made one strong reason, one strong point, and I'm adding that other one. They're basically supporting the official story in every way they possibly can, and they just leave a little bit out where they say, oh, we don't think Al-Qaeda was flying the plane. So that way they can say, oh, we don't support the official story. Like, it's wrong to say we support, but they support everything else. And if they, if you bring up something that challenges, that goes against that official story, they will challenge you. They are supporting. The way I tend to put it is virtually the entire official story. Barbara Honegger calls it official story light. That's her.
But my question more specifically was why the official story? Why the official story picked that path?
Well, to be more genuine to all facets of this Pentagon issue, the third theory is that there was a missile fired,
right,
and that was the path of the missile. But again, I take no position. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't think that holds up for reasons that I won't spend a lot of time on now, but I don't think that holds up. And I think, see what it is, Susan, basically they needed evidence to sell this story, the path. That's what Lloyd England, and if we get a chance to get into that in a future meeting, Lloyd England was there to sell the official flight path, because by having the pole supposedly hit his cab, that reinforced the idea that the poles actually were hit by a plane. And it also, because of the width of the distance apart of the poles, that means it had to be a big plane, because a small plane would have flown between the poles, right? So the poles were there to sell the flight path. And so they wanted to prepare. I mean, there isn't a plane hitting the building. This damage is all prepared. So they don't need it to be a good flight path. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that the evidence seems to all line up, no pun intended. So I think that's,
And the South Path is, critical to the official story of lining up.
Yeah, that's
Well,
exactly what it is.
It's the South Path, which is straight, basically entirely to the south of that Navy Annex building. So it's the entire plane has to be essentially beside the Navy Annex. The whole thing is staged for that flight path. The light poles, the damage to the building, the way the C-ring exit hole, all of that lines up. So it sells the story that there really was a plane and it really did hit the building.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the plane didn't go on that path.
So obviously there was damage to the building. It was not a plane,
Right.
in your view.
Right.
So that leaves really only two other things, as far as I can figure out. The damage to the building was either a missile or a pre-planned explosion.
Yeah, I think I support the latter of the two. And I mean, I'm not an expert on missiles, and maybe there are some people that understand how that would work better than I do. But I'm trying to figure out how would a missile make a nice exit hole in the C-ring, and then there'd be no evidence of the missile. Like, why wouldn't it keep going? So I'm and also the opening in the building, I think, is too big for a missile. Like, it's the wrong shape for a missile. It's roughly kind of airplane shaped a little bit, So I don't see how that part would work.
Lorenzo has raised his hand in the middle of that comment.
I got my hand up, so.
Okay.
The couple of questions. One, Adam wanted to respond to my question about Chandler questioning his validity.
Right.
And give him a chance to talk. And the other thing in my mind, I always go back to where are the videos of the cameras?
Right.
I mean, it's the most heavily, filmed building in the world, in my opinion. And
Yep.
It would clear up everything. We wouldn't be having these arguments. And they won't release anything. So obviously there's something really wrong with the story. And Chandler, I forgot what his answer was to that, but he thinks that one video shot, was very clear and they could figure out the speed.
He actually said that was the only video there was. And I'm like flabbergasted when he said that.
Yeah, that kind of.
That really threw me.
Put a hole in his argument, in my opinion, but.
He said something else, Al. He said something else. He said that, well, he speculated that perhaps because they were renovating that section of the Pentagon, that maybe the cameras were down while they were doing the renovation. I mean, to me, that just is kind of another crazy excuse. I can't.
we're talking about outside the Pentagon cameras that were
Right.
from the Citgo station to
Yeah.
the Navy
Well-
building. I mean, you
Well,
name
you actually, you mentioned this, the Citgo. There's another thing that Costi does. He takes because I think we do have the Citgo surveillance, not of the building, but there's a surveillance video of the gas pumps at the gas station, and you see like a black. It looks like a black glitch. I don't know what the heck it actually is, but Costi claims that's the shadow of the plane going overhead. And it's not a shadow. You can tell it's not a shadow. I mean, first of all, a plane going 500 miles an hour. I don't know that the shadow would be even detectable as a shadow. It would be going so fast. But so he claims that's another thing. And what I think is typical of what this group does is they don't say, well, we think this could be the shadow, or it's our position. They state it. That's a shadow. Like it's a fact. It's not even in dispute. So anyway, you just made me think of that.
So your opinion about the tapes from the cameras, do you have a position on that?
You mean the video we've seen, or the ones that they've withheld?
No, the ones that we can't get access to.
Well, I mean, I think that the conclusion I would draw is probably the one that you're inclined to draw too, which is that they don't show us something that will confirm that their story is false. I mean, it's not something I've done. There are probably people that have paid more attention to like which videos are in question. And I know there's the is it the DoubleTree one across the street where it's sort of the parking lot. There are different, and there was like a Sheraton video,
Right.
but anyway, this is not something I know the most about, but there's none of those videos that have been released are like show what would have been a plane had there been a plane.
Well, Gene has a FOIA request on the videos.
Well,
So
And Sandra.
I think it's definitely a good thing to do. That's for sure. I look forward to seeing what the result is if they or what excuse they give or whatever.
Oh,
Right now, it's with Mick.
yeah,
real-
go ahead.
Real quick, it's with
Right.
Mick Harrison, and the Department of Justice wants $24,880 to release the 100 unreviewed videos. So that's where we stand.
Yeah.
How much did you say?
$24,880. And what we understand is if we refile with the journalist, we could waive those fees, but right now it's in Mick's court. So
Yeah.
Okay,
So
interesting.
Talk about obstruction.
exactly.
let's let Adam talk.
Sorry, yes,
He
thank you.
wanted to respond.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Some of you that I've had the chance to speak with, I say thank you. Some of you that I'm meeting for the first time, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Adam Eisenberg. I'm the founder of the Orion Project, which is a 6-person team that is dedicated to getting to the bottom of this issue. I am now an independent researcher. I am independently researching this issue at Harvard. This is my ID to show you. I'm trying to get that. I moved to New England. I've been up in this area for a while now. I can just tell you that I spent 240 hours on site from September 11th to the 30th as a member of Alpha Company in an ongoing operation to this day called Operation Noble Eagle. I saw a lot of things that didn't make a lot of sense, and those things have led me to my search for justice today, which has been very underground and very quiet, because when I started to turn to the 9/11 Truth Movement and attempt to show them the fruits of my labors, that's when I started to experience the greatest opposition that I have basically faced yet. And I can go ahead and say these people right out in front: David Chandler, Wayne Coastie, Ken Jenkins, Nelson Martins, Ed Brotherton, Adam Fitzgerald, Sean Russell, Darren Harvey. They have been operating a very coordinated effort against me. And so it's not what you believe, it's what you can prove. And so I have no doubt that David Chandler thinks that my credibility doesn't exist. it's because I can prove things that man probably, things that man doesn't probably want me to prove. I can start saying some names. I can just tell you that when I started to give presentations, names started to appear in the comments section of some of these presentations. And ultimately, these names were high-ranking officials on site. And when I started to dig into these people, I saw that they had connections that basically were off the books. And my proximity to the event, Al, ultimately opens doors that researchers, even in their best efforts, just can't open. And I don't genuinely think a lot of decent research has been done on the Pentagon, because I can prove from my own FOIA requests that they're coming back empty-handed. And a lot of reference documents in Arlington County's AAR are said to not even exist. And so the Craig has seen what I'm talking about. Craig can also attest to the emails that are now almost 3 years old, where I have tried to engage David respectfully and engage a lot of other people on this issue respectfully, only to find that they had absolutely no interest whatsoever in engaging me. They really were only trying to get close to me so that they could either control me or attempt to smear me. I give you an example. The last time that I spoke to David Chandler, we were on a Zoom meeting face-to-face, and right in the middle of this topic about 9/11, he kept screaming at me that I have a mental illness. He said, you just kept screaming, you have PTSD, you have a mental illness. So I ask anybody that's been involved in 9/11 Truth how many times they've done that in the middle of a conversation. But again, I'm not going to bury David Chandler in places like this. I'm going to do it in other ways. And I have no problem announcing the first way. On February 22nd, I'm going to be going on a very large podcast. This is going to be the biggest one yet. They have over 500,000 people following them. And I'm going to issue a $5,000 debate challenge to David Chandler and Wayne Coastie and Kane Jenkins. And that also extends to the entire world. There are some people in the 9/11 Truth movement who are not eligible for this because they have already not taken me up on that challenge. The following people are not eligible. That's Nelson Martins, that's Adam Fitzgerald, that's Darren Harvey, and that's Carmen Lee Wheelbarger, who is my lead suspect. And so, yes, I said it, if we were going to have conspiracy, we would need to have people. And that person is Carmen Lee Wheelbarger. I believe he was the architect to all of this. And I've connected him to what is seemingly a mission that has reached the highest echelons of our national defenses. And Craig, I think, can confidently also say that he's been watching me and my work for the last couple years. And that's really all I can say about that. There's a lot of resources out there that you guys may not be aware of. Testimony that exists from people in the unit that I was in. We did have 500 to 700 people around the clock working in 12-hour shifts. Of course, these efforts aren't described in the 9/11 Commission report. They're not really discussed in the Arlington County AAR efforts, and they're not really out there in a lot of ways. But I've been trying to, for the last 3 years, basically get to the bottom of the people that I've got on site. And ultimately, once my work is done, I'm going to be taking this work upstairs to the Kennedy School, where James Schwartz and Agent Chris Combs are senior fellows, and they will answer to this. They have no choice but to answer to this because of testimony like mine and testimony like the one that's in here, and also testimony of Carmen Lee Wheelbarger of KLW News, who was really the person that was responsible for what happened at the Pentagon. And
Adam, what was that book that you were holding up?
this is a book that was written by a guy. It was edited by a guy named Mark Joseph Mongolitz. It's called Voices of the 9/11 Pentagon Recovery Effort, Essays from the U.S. Army's Old Guard. It should be known that I have no attachment to this, but I want to give you guys an example, if I can have the microphone for another 30 seconds. So it said that the FBI had total chain of custody of the evidence. Well, it says here, according to Christopher Bradley on page 23, as the DEA completed their evidence searches, they boxed up the findings and loaded them into white, unmarked Isuzu moving trucks. Well, according to the official documents, the DEA only served in capacities of evidence sifting, and they were only there on a volunteer basis. So they right here, according to this old guard soldier, was, I'm sorry, there he is. There it is. So according to this old guard soldier right here, that the evidence was basically put into these unmarked, you know, barely movable trucks. And here, I'll just say it for you guys. As the ranking soldier in my team, I was struck driving. My team was armed and I was given a paper map with step-by-step instructions. The brakes were so bad that I remember them to this day with great distaste. We left the Pentagon, traveled to a secret government warehouse, and unloaded the evidence. The warehouse contained retired presidential limousines, huge items under thick plastic, and I'm sure the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark, but we didn't see it. That same day, we were treated with a quick visit to the DEA headquarters in Pentagon City. The agent gave us some DEA shirts to wear while we transported the evidence. And so I'm here to tell you guys, the story of what happened at the Pentagon on 9/11 is found among the old guard because they were the people that were on site doing most of the work. And I'm the first person that was among that efforts that really started questioning the narrative. And when I questioned it, I stumbled upon a name. And that name right now, he is engaged in a disinformation campaign on YouTube and Rumble under the guise of KLW News. It has over 9,000 views. He's got over 50,000 people on YouTube following him alone. And he has familial connections to a woman named Catherine Wheelbarger, Katie Wheelbarger, who is a Lockheed Martin weapons military industrial complex executive. And she also sits appointed by Biden on the Reagan created Institution of Peace. She was confirmed, and she's worked her way up through a number of years. She's worked at the Chertoff Group. She's worked for a number of administrations. She's worked directly for, Dick Cheney. So why was her uncle really the guy on site? And now he's making videos where he's basically, misleading the public on the Ukrainian conflict. And I've got him saying a lot of interesting things about what he did and didn't do at the Pentagon, and how it all connects to right now. I've got pictures of him with the head of Ukrainian intelligence. And so, I mean, if we think that Ukraine has some conspiracy going on, I can just tell you that it's not what I believe. It's what I can show you guys and what I'm prepared to show the world come February 22nd of next year, that this was a military industrial complex operation. And I hate to say it, that's just all she wrote. And the rest is history. And so I appreciate all you guys are doing, because I know that some of you I've had some words with in the past, and we might have, you guys might have seen some frustration, but it's because for 3 years I've watched some of the people running around this movement acting crazy. And, you want to talk about cherry picking evidence, I can point to some people that are doing that. And so, I want to say thank you guys for the effort. I didn't mean to get on my soapbox, but there's a debate challenge. If you guys know David Chandler, David, $5,000 debate challenge. The Free Thought Project will host this and moderate this. And so challenge is out there to the world.
Do you have an
Thanks, Adam.
opinion on the videos and where they are? And
I've given a series of talks. I do that because I try to give a little more evidence and a little more evidence every time I talk, because I quite frankly, Al, think that, these people that we speak of are running a very coordinated campaign. And so I'm trying to move slowly because I'm trying to understand all of it. Napoleon once said that if your enemies are making mistakes, you should let them keep making mistakes. And so I'm not here to turn my attention to the truth movement as much as I think that people are nefariously involved in it. My plan is to basically expose the people that I know that were on site that had no authority to be there, whose testimony about how they got there and how they got off, including how they handled evidence. There's a lot of anomaly stories about the evidence that go much further than this, and they go right to the team of people that were my lead suspects. But also I can bring forth a series of other anomalies that have nothing to do with what even occurred on site, but before and after. And so, to put it frankly, I've got a lot of people in a world of shit, Al, and I would love to discuss it, with you personally. I've heard your name. I think I know who you are, but it's extensive, and it's bad because I'm sure some of you people in this room are friends with some of these people, despite what they say. So, I'm a little late to the game, but I think it's actually served me well because I've had the ability to sit and see the lay of the land, and to assemble a team. And so I'm very excited. I'm going to announce this debate challenge to the world in February, and then I'm basically going to go crazy with podcasts. And my goal is to get on the Joe Rogan podcast in 2024. So this will reach an audience. And I have done a lot of podcasts. I can send you those videos, and I can also send you a lot of other things.
I personally want to thank you for being here. And my personal opinion is I'd love to have you come back.
I would love to be here, and I would actually go even further. I will give you guys, first glance of a presentation that I'm working on with my team right now. My team brings together an aspect in and of each person basically brings their own level of expertise. So we're also in the process of basically scaling a presentation to show in a very linear fashion all the anomalies. And I also should say, somebody asked earlier about Aldo from CIT. I consider Aldo to be a friend. I wouldn't say that he's working with the Orion project, but if I needed to reach Aldo right now and get an answer for something, he would pick up the phone. I'm just basically taking my own work and my own testimony, and then putting together everything else, and we're trying to present it, and we're going to do that, and I'd be happy to do it here for you guys.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
So we have 3 hands raised, and I've lost track as to who is first.
Barry hasn't asked anything yet, so maybe he might be one. But
Barry's hand has been up forever.
Yeah,
All
you know
right,
what?
Barry it is.
I don't mind. I don't mind going next. My picture disappeared, and it says the host deleted my picture. So whoever is
I
in
didn't
charge.
do that. I'm the host, and I did not delete your picture.
Yeah, it's gone.
I
as you can
promise I
see.
did not.
It's
No,
on you, Barry.
I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just saying my pictures disappeared. And that's
All right, we can hear you.
yeah, so audio is great. I don't have that much to add in this respect. I've enjoyed this. Enjoyment maybe isn't the right word. I've been engaged. I think this really valuable group. A lot of excellent points made. And one thing that I mentioned to Craig actually a couple of days ago is to quote Malcolm Gladwell. And Malcolm Gladwell, in one of his books, talks about one thin slice. That's a term he uses. The example he gives is that a large museum in Los Angeles, in California anyway, because I didn't go to the book to find this, it purchased a very, very expensive sculpture. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And of course, these art pieces have to have provenance. There has to be a trail of ownership and so forth. And they actually put up the sculpture, and it was prideful of them. And then someone checked more deeply into the information that the guy who sold them the sculpture gave them. And what was found was a phone number in New York City in a certain year belonged to one of the owners, but it turned out that area code did not exist in that year. So this was the one thin slice to prove that the museum got snookered and was sold a sculpture, a bill of goods. Now, with the Pentagon, to me, anyway, if I was like not in a big group like this discussing all the sorts of sophisticated angles and all sorts of important evidence, such as Adam has just mentioned, super important evidence. But if I were in a smaller group or I was just talking to one person who said, you know, that Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, that was terrible. All you have to do is refer to the one thin slice of that plane, transport type aircraft that size having hit the Pentagon, and the silhouette of the alleged crash into the Pentagon does not match an airplane in any way, shape, or form. So it's actually on a thin slice, it's a fat slice. But you know, you couldn't go into all that has been gone into this evening very valuably, in some cases, without losing your audience.
Okay.
And in the regular world, I think it's better to stick with one thin slice and just say, how would you explain that? And they'd say, well, maybe they try to change the subject or whatever. Say, no, explain why the facade of the Pentagon does not conform to what it would if there was a giant aircraft crashed into it. Answer that. Okay, I mean, that's what I would say. And then if whomever you're speaking with says, well, yeah, I guess you got something there, then you could add, you know what? Have you ever heard that any wreckage was found in the Pentagon? Those giant engines, do you ever recall there were giant engines found? And then you could, you know, finish up in under 5 minutes and with probably a convincing your audience that they were suckered into believing that a plane hit the Pentagon. But those two things just show it couldn't have been so. That's all. It's just a thought I had. And you know, we in the 9/11 Truth Movement, we can sometimes get into the weeds, you know, into too much detail, so that it leaves an opening for doubt where there should not be any doubt. That's it. That's my
Yeah, I want to.
unaccompanied by a picture little rant.
I would just say that I would say that an audience of truthers and an audience of outsiders that's two different animals.
Right.
And you know, if this was a group of, you know, a peace group that had never dealt with 9/11, you know, then I would obviously make very different choices in terms of what I would present to them. So I agree with you about getting into the weeds. I think, however, with the truth movement and the Pentagon, I think we have to get into the weeds, and I think to a degree, because first of all, the Chandler Group has attempted to insert an element of doubt in every single piece of evidence we have. Even if it's completely invalid, some people are going to be, that maybe don't want to take any time to look into it, are going to basically be discouraged by those little bits of doubt. For example, they claim that the, you know, the markings on the columns and the damage indicate that the wings were sucked into the hole and the tail section was pulled down and so they can, because they dress it up like science, and that's all they do. It's the trappings of science. It's not actual science. Because they do that, some people who don't, you know, aren't inclined to take a lot of time themselves are going to sort of they're going to be possibly discouraged by that. They'll say, well, we don't really know. Maybe it did. Maybe the wings did get pulled into the building. I mean, you know, it's possible. So when I'm dealing with a truther audience, I want to nail every single piece of not only the evidence, but the disinformation that's being used to, you know, pour water into the wine, I guess. So in that respect, I think some of these weeds are necessary when we're being lied to, and when we're being, you know, by people that are supposed to be on our side. Then sometimes we unfortunately have to get into those weeds in order to, you know, the weeds have to be pulled apart from the, I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but you get my point. So yeah, I definitely think if I were dealing with some new people, I would like I have a slide that I've shared on Facebook that's basically like 6 or 7 points, like things that David Chandler should have to answer. One of them is why didn't the engines make exit holes? You know, why wasn't the concrete foundation like torn up? You know, why were there no large pieces of wreckage on the lawn? So those basic, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 just solid points, and I think he can't answer any of those, and neither can the official story purveyors. So I you know, that would be my response to that.
Well, I quite agree with you, Craig. And
Yeah.
that would, though they're relatively simple things that are incontrovertible about the Pentagon. So you
Yeah.
got the shape of the alleged plane entering the Pentagon, you got the lack of wreckage, you got the suspicious wreckage, and as you say, 7 or 8 things. But I'm not criticizing this session or yourself at all.
Right. No,
It's just
yeah.
it's just my idea that sometimes in other forums that we shouldn't get into too much of a long spiel, but
Right.
focus on the incontrovertible impossibilities and absurdities. And I admire, by the way, I just say I've got to go because I got to go to bed early. I've got a huge, get up hugely early in the morning. But I really admire immensely your calling out these agents of the state. That is so vital. And you're doing it courageously, and you're doing it with names, and you're doing it with evidence. And this is an invaluable contribution. And so no wonder that WordPress wanted to emanate Truth and Shadows. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate it.
Chris
Let's give
Berger,
Richard Kreshnik a chance.
oh, well,
Yeah, hello, can you guys hear me?
Chris Berger had his hand up
Oh,
first.
well, okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Craig, yeah, thank you very much for what you're doing to the movement to expose these guys. I mean, it just takes a lot of work. I'm sure
Thanks,
that
Chris.
I'm sure that the perpetrators didn't forget the plan to cover up either. And I
They
believe
sure
that
didn't.
that's exactly what's happening. And it should be, I mean, it shouldn't be a controversy in the truth movement that
No.
that there's no real sign of a Boeing hitting the Pentagon. It should be very clean and straightforward, exposing the government lie that there's no wreckage, and you show that to anybody, and that should wake up a lot of normies to 9/11 truth, and the movement
I agree.
should be united behind that. Just some, you know, I'm also I'm an activist here in Boston, and I'm also a researcher. I have a degree in aerospace engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer. So, you know, I think that when I take a look at this evidence, I mean, I can tell you that, I mean, are you aware that, like, for one thing, the world speed record of a wheel-driven car was broken in 2018 of 503 miles an hour. So if you want to do a YouTube video of the car 2018 speed record and watch that car go, it has to be, it's in a shape of a rocket ship, because it has to have a very low front area profile to be able to achieve such speeds. And not only that when you're looking at the car, you're about half a mile away, and that car's going so fast, you can't even clearly identify it. It's just, I mean, 500 miles an hour is a very, very fast speed. So, and
Absolutely.
it says that they could clearly identify an airplane going by them going 500 miles. That's not true. You're not even going to be able to see it. And not only that, an airplane can't even, a Boeing can't even go more than say 340 miles an hour at sea level with the thrust of the, you know, in a full dive, just the amount of power to overcome the air density because it's 3 times denser.
Chris, can I point something out to you?
Yeah.
I'll
Go
let you
ahead.
back
Go ahead.
to let you continue, but I just wanted to mention something. You talk about the speed, and I think that's an important point.
Right.
The Chandler is there's like maybe one witness. I don't know if there's more than one, but one anyway, that said that he could see the left engine hitting the concrete retaining wall that sticks up from the grass. Like it looks like about 6 inches or not even a foot from the grass. And some witness said, oh, the engine hit that because there's a gouge out of it. And Chandler takes that as like, well, the concrete retaining wall was hit by the left engine. And I mean, where would you get that from? How could somebody say that they saw that engine going at that speed, that they saw that engine hit that little piece of concrete sticking out of the lawn? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember watching Chandler's first speech that he gave on this, and he looked like he was very uncomfortable giving the speech. I was looking at his body language.
He should be.
And you know, and that's maybe he's just in a really bad situation where he has to do this. So I mean, I feel bad for the guy. You know, if he's having to spread this information, maybe he's, you know, he's being threatened. He has to take money, or his family's being threatened, and that's fortunately that's what the cabal does. Another thing I wanted to point out is, are you aware that Costi was present in the April Gallup testimony in Connecticut?
No, I don't think I did know that.
So there was a court, the court trial in Connecticut with April Gallup versus Cheney and all that. I believe that Wayne Costi was actually there at the trial supporting the official story.
Oh, I didn't. I
heard that. I mean, I believe that Wayne Costi is the licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, and he was actually there at the trial with April Gallup supporting the official, you know, sticking up for Dick Cheney, supporting the official story. That's a very important piece of evidence that I remember seeing it sometime. Yeah. So I mean, you might want to look into that. Yeah. Okay. That's I just, you know, thanks for all your work. You're you know, doing a good job exposing all this. I mean, the best thing we can do is just, you know, go through a whole list and saying this is why these people are wrong. And if newcomers come to our group and say, look, you know, there's a group of these people supporting this, you can take a look at it and decide for yourself. But unfortunately, you know, the overwhelming amount of 9/11 truthers, you know, say that no Boeing hit the Pentagon. Just a very small percentage, and this is this group right here that's really doing a lot for the movement. Yeah.
Well, let me just say quickly before we go. Before we go to the next one, real quick, I just want to say that, you know, some people would say to me and have said to me, like, well, you should really just, all you have to do is just disagree with their evidence and show that, you know, which I think I did tonight as well. But my contention is that it's also it's necessary to call them out on blatant dishonesty, because if people are throwing dishonest things at you, I mean, they can keep throwing it forever, right? And so they keep you running around trying to debunk everything they're doing. The tactics have to be exposed in addition to just stating the evidence and showing where they're wrong and all that. But it's the tactics have to be exposed. Otherwise, they can just keep throwing stuff at the wall forever.
Yeah, especially if they have a pattern of doing it, you can say, well, here's several incidents. I mean, maybe you might make a mistake once in a while, but if you're being caught being deceptive dozens of times, and you can prove this person is deliberately being deceptive dozens of times.
I
mean,
I believe that case can be very strongly made. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Richard,
we have
you
2
wanna go
more hands up, and we're really approaching 9 o'clock. So hopefully these last 2 hands are going to be really quick. I'm sorry, Richard, I think Lorenzo had his hand up before you did. Hopefully you'll be quick, Lorenzo.
I'm gonna take at least 45 minutes, honey.
Oh, shoot.
My answer
All
will be
right,
also
I'm gonna
45 minutes,
stop
Laura.
recording. No.
Okay, thanks, first of all, for pulling the Boston 9/11 Truth group, bringing this forum out. I want to remember the presentation that I gave with Wayne Costi at a group with Richard, and I believe Al and Chris were there, and Jane and
It was
Susan.
at Jane's house.
Yep, and Susan gave me this, which I brought with me for that call, and this is the we got this at the model of a A-10,
Oh, right.
which is my
Right.
my chosen aircraft. I also want to thank Adam for there was a good conversation that we had to be able to present to you the work that I've done on the Pentagon at 9/11 Synthesis. I'd just like to bring up my screen and really quickly go through at least one item. So, can you see this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
This is the kind of the key, which is people. There were a lot of witnesses that testified to to missiles, and a lot of witnesses that testified to aircraft. And the meme that I made for 9/11 Synthesis, the Pentagon Airborne Sortie, incorporates all of this. So there was an aircraft. Some people describe it as a computer jet, which this could be mistaken for. And this is a perfect weapon, indeed, a tool for the job. Laser sight seeking. There's a number of different guidance systems that could have brought it home, and then also a variance in warheads, including bunker busting warheads, which would have a forward force charge, like a very focused forward force charge. There could have been internal explosions in the Pentagon too. This is just one of two possibilities of missiles. It could have been something that of course they penetrate on contact, but then their secondary charge goes off. Also, this little section here, this is somebody else's graphic, but that cotton looking stuff is not jet fuel. It's not a black or a dark fuel exhaust. You'd find most jet aircraft are hydrocarbons, and this is a solid fuel, in my opinion, solid fuel rocket exhaust, which is what you can see right here. That little spot right there. This is enlarged of that little section right there. That was what Craig showed us before when he had that picture that they presented with the American Airlines. Also, the explosion is really fast, and after the first four flames, there's no sign of any hydrocarbon smoke. So that's another point that you would look at when you're looking at a post-crash fire. A couple more details. This is what I presume to be solid fuel rocket exhaust. This is not a conflagration. That is an explosion. That's bright and it's fast. And then, and this thing here, this was Wayne shared his screen with me on that night. And he brought this picture up, and that was when I took the model back from him, this A-10 Warthog model back from him, and sort of made an approach, then a climb and a right bank. And the Boston 9/11 people.
Move your cursor so we can see what's inside the circle.
Oh, okay. This right here.
Yeah, move your cursor away because you're obscuring what's inside the circle. Thank you.
Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Susan was there, and I brought this little model up. He had it projected on the wall, on Jane's fireplace wall, and I went into a climb and a right bank, and the model sort of over. It's a vague overlay, like a shadow overlay, but there was a correlation. So I believe that may have been the aircraft that Roosevelt Roberts testified to flying over the Pentagon. He also said that
Right.
the aircraft circled around.
Yeah,
Also described it as a second aircraft because by then, by the time his testimony came out, everybody knew that the first aircraft struck the Pentagon, according to the government and the media. So, you know, there's
right.
another diversion, another, you know, plan in the whole deceit
Right.
event. Oh, yeah, of
But we
course.
know, sorry, just to interrupt for a second, Lawrence, but we know that the plane that he's describing couldn't be, like, there's a C-130 that arrived in the area, but it was like 2 minutes later, 2 or 3 minutes later. So the plane he's describing, there is no other plane.
No,
that
there
that
was
could-
no other plane. He only assumed that it was a second plane because he had heard that the first
Yeah.
plane. So his testimony said the second airplane, but it was really
Right.
the only aircraft. I concur. He also said that it circled back and loitered in part of his testimony. And he described it as if he came back to see if the work was done, to see if he was successful. He was assuming or making an allegation without any real evidence.
I don't remember that. Okay.
Again, all these flight paths, you know, the right bank and the climb, the direction of the aircraft, and having it fly over his area of the Pentagon. Okay, this is the tail end of an air-to-ground, an AGM-65. This is a fairly solid, not a very long tube though. I did further study into this after I posted this. And this is something that Gene had on his Ray shared this picture. It took me a while to find it, of a piece of shrapnel that was stuck in a tree, explosively ejected from something. It could have been a section of the AGM-65, possibly part of the engine. Just another piece of hard evidence that's, you know, stuck in the site that needs some sort of interpretation to tie it into the whole story. This is the latest, you know, finally getting this was you know, pretty neat, because that is an interesting piece of evidence, and it really, you know, makes you wonder when I put all the pieces together. The aircraft type, somebody described it again, looking like a commuter jet, which you could mistake a Warthog for, because it has two rear engines on the side of the aircraft. It has straight wings, but there are some commuter jets that have straight wings too. The more modern ones are mostly swept, but there, you know, some of the earlier commuter jets look a lot like a Warthog if you're underneath them. So that's pretty much it. Again, I want to thank Boston 9/11 Truth for hosting both Wayne and me to co-present our theories, and it was a good evening. I mean, we were friendly. I remember handing him this at the beginning of the night. Put it in his hand, and just at the end of his presentation, I went over and took it back from him. And that's when his piece was on the screen, and I was able to fly my Warthog into, you know, over the Pentagon. That was cool. All right, thanks, Susan. Thanks, Boston 9/11 Truth, and thanks, Craig, for joining us. And
thank you.
All right, Richard.
Richard, you're up.
I have a lot of difficulty thinking that Ken Jenkins is some kind of an agent trying to undermine the 9/11 Truth Movement. I was so impressed with his work for so many years. You know, I mean, you know, he lost his job exposing the lie about how the fire would affect.
Are you mixing him up with Kevin Ryan?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about Kevin Ryan. Now, is Kevin Ryan not part of this group?
Yes, he is part of this group, but
That's
he's just
right. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'm
He's not
talking
one of the
about,
most active ones, but he's definitely in support of them. Yeah.
so I'm talking about Kevin Ryan. So
right.
I
Kevin
thought
Jenkins has that film festival, 9/11.
yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I know who. Yeah, okay. So you know, Ken Jenkins and his work has always made it very clear that it was an inside job. His evidence.
You mean Ryan now?
Ryan,
You
I'm
said
sorry.
Talking
said
about
Forgive
Jenkins
me,
again.
forgive me. Kevin Ryan has always
Yeah.
made it clear that it was the government that did 9/11. All of his evidence supported that way. He did that book where
Yeah.
who are the 20 people most likely to have been the key people in 9/11? On and on and on. All of his work is you know, it's sterling. It's among the best that the 9/11 movement has put out, the most effective, and I always thought the most strictly, rigorously scientific. And the notion that he ended up deliberately undermining the movement by supporting a theory that he knew was false. The only way I can imagine that possibly being true is if his life depended on it or something like this, which is of course possible. So I prefer to take exception if you are alleging that he is a deliberately lying underminer of our movement, because I don't.
Well, I didn't even mention his name. I don't think, Richard. I don't think I even mentioned his name all night.
Right.
Yeah, but you're saying he's part of this group, so I don't know.
Well, you asked me if he was part of it, and
Yeah,
he is. I mean,
and
I'll
then
say about
also I was so impressed. I only was with Wayne in person once at the gathering of the United National Anti-War Coalition in was that Hartford, or where the hell was it, or was it the Pittsburgh one when we
He definitely shows up at all these events. I mean, I was with Wayne Costa at the Occupy Building 7 event in New York.
yeah, well, at this one,
but that doesn't mean anything.
We failed to get a booth. They wouldn't give us a booth, and but he got, and they wouldn't give him a booth. So he got a booth anyway as an independent organization. And I was anyway, and you know, he was supporting the whole booth was just AE 9/11 Truth stuff that he was supporting.
yeah.
Now I don't know him, and I'm willing to entertain that what you're alleging about him is true. But on the other hand, you know, he has supported other, you know, allegations about the Twin Towers and Building 7 that make the government the culprit. You know, so he's done both, which doesn't mean he's not doing what you say he was doing.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
Let's
All right,
not
that's all.
forget the importance of the Pentagon. The importance of the Pentagon was endless wars. Without the Pentagon being attacked by so-called terrorists, we would not be fighting endless wars today.
I'm not sure I believe that.
I'm not sure I believe that either, but I know what you're saying.
I don't think in the public mind, the Pentagon plays that big of a role at all. There's probably a lot of people who don't even know about the Pentagon. What everybody knows about are the Twin Towers, and that's where most of the people died, and that's what I think. I think we
But it
could
was
have even.
not the Twin Towers were not a government building.
Yep.
I know, but
innocent people,
Extremely
innocent
important
people,
in
yeah.
terms
I think what matters is
political.
what
One at a
matters
time,
is
one at a time, please.
what matters is that somewhere approaching 3,000 people have to die. That's what does the trick.
Right.
And they did the trick with the Twin Towers. I don't agree that the Pentagon is the most important thing. I understand what you're saying about it's very crucial for proving that the government did it. It's an important piece of the puzzle.
Well, it's,
But
I mean, it's the only part of the deception that it had to be the government. There's nobody else that can sneak onto the Pentagon grounds and stage
Right,
a
right.
a plane crash.
that's right.
But the Bush administration was the one that used the Pentagon as a reason to go to war.
That's right. That's my
Right, that's true.
geopolitical ruse.
Mhm.
They would have gone anyway, I think, but they had that as their excuse.
Mhm.
I do want to comment on something Richard said though, because I think this is important that, you know, there are a lot of people in the movement that will say, well, you know, if somebody says that the government is responsible, then that means that they're not an agent, or they can't be an agent. I don't think that's the case, and I think honestly, if you're trying to, I mean, obviously there are the Richard Shermers and the Mick Wests of the world, you know, who are probably on some payroll somewhere. You know, they don't have to support anything. We know, like, they're not trying to influence truthers, but somebody that is attempting, it is being used to infiltrate the movement for the purposes of kind of distracting or dividing or muddying the waters or doing all the things that agents are good at doing. I think they're going to have to be on board with the towers being a demolition. Otherwise, no truth can take them seriously.
Absolutely.
Right? So
Yep.
when you gave the example of Kevin Ryan being fired, you know, I mean, David Chandler always gets credit for forcing NIST to admit free fall, which of course is not true. There's nobody forced NIST to do anything, but you know, that's used as as the gives him credibility, and Ryan gets his credibility from, you know, he got fired. So
I must say one thing that makes me very suspicious of Chandler was precisely that he got NIST to admit to that whatever it was, 8 seconds of free fall, because I agree with you. Nobody can make NIST agree to anything. And so that does make me suspicious of him. Yeah.
And, you know, it's interesting, Ryan, too, in his book, you know, yes, he pointed to 19 suspects, but he also says in the book that we should accept as much of the official story as possible. That's a line from his book. If I had it in front of me, I'd read you the passage, but I don't. But and he's also basically joined in the chorus of sort of suggesting that CIT are agents themselves, and that, to me, that's a red flag for me when people are doing that. That, you know, that's a red flag. So anyway, you know, I don't know. I don't always, you know, like what I always say is I think this is definitely a COINTELPRO operation. I can't say with certainty that some member of this group, they could be innocently duped, possibly. You know, I can never say that's impossible. So somebody might be going along with it, genuinely thinking that they're helping, but not everybody in that group is genuinely helping. There are, I think it's being directed by agents of the state. That's my view. The bottom line is you can't be a truther and lie about things. You can't lie about other truthers, which is, you know, this guy that used to run the Facebook group that I think Gene and Sandra now run. You know, he used to say he had a whole page devoted to me where he said that I support space beams and holograms at the towers, and you know, he had a whole bunch of stuff that I supposedly, which of course I don't. You know, I don't believe, you know, he claims I said a missile flew over the Pentagon. So this is all just kind of mischief stuff, right? But I wrote an article at the time saying you can't be a truther and tell lies about truthers. You like, it should disqualify you as, you know, being able to call yourself that, because the very least we should be telling the truth. We can be wrong, but if we're not telling the truth, then we're not truthers.
Well said.
Gene, you're up next.
All right, just 30 seconds. I want to thank Craig. I really enjoyed your first segment. um, thank you all. Thank you, Boston, for doing this. I did want to plug that book that Adam shared. If you guys want to buy it, because there's a discount out there. If you go to McFarland Books, I shared the link in the chat. You can get this Voices of the 9/11 Pentagon Recovery Effort. $30 is pretty pricey, but if you go to Amazon, we don't like to support Amazon because it's there and even used is more expensive, $40. So this book is valuable. So again, use that McFarlandBooks.com and make sure you click on this button because I got 25% off. And it's good through, I guess, the rest of till Christmas. So if you want to get it, there it is.
Oh,
Cool. That's all. Thank
cool.
you, guys.
Great. Thank you.
I'm going to get
Great.
to bed. I appreciate this. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Yep.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, everyone.
We have our Boston 9/11 agenda, but I think it's so late, we might have to punt on it. For those of you that want to leave, that's fine. We did want to mention the Boston Tea Party on the 16th of December, looking for volunteers. It's the 250th anniversary of the Tea Party, so there should be a ton of people out there, and we'd like to get our literature distributed. Chris and I have done it in the past, and I've cornered Chris into agreeing that he would come again as John Hancock. And and I'm planning on going down myself. So anybody else that wants to join us, please come.
Yeah. So Al, it's actually, it's on the 16th. It's a Saturday, so
Saturday, right?
it's not going to interfere with anybody's work or anything,
Right, exactly, including yours.
Yeah, and I mean, it is the 250th, so it might be bigger than the other ones too.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Well, we can get a lot of literature distributed,
Yep, we'll talk further on that. That's a good one.
Well, why don't we put out on our listserv the meeting time and place?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We'll do that.
All right.
There were other things to mention. Miles is not with us, had to go early, but we've had some success with the Community Church of Boston and this Sammy Al Amar, who is a professor that won the Sacco Vanzetti Award. And he responded to us as far as getting what we're trying to do is get Graham McQueen's documentary in front of the church. They're running Peace, meaning the documentary Peace, War, and 9/11. They're doing the Kennedy speech that was part of Kennedy's anti-war message back in 1963, I guess. So anyway, our whole point is that we're trying to get involved with the anti-war movement here in Boston. And this is part of what I think is a good introduction. So hopefully, and Miles was instrumental in getting us introduced to them. So hopefully we can make the most of it. For those of you that don't know,
we're also pursuing a couple of theaters to show it, right?
Yes, yeah, we still have talked about that as well. The Watertown Library or the West Newton Cinema. There is, I believe, the David Ray Griffin Memorial at December 3rd, presented by Daniel Ganser. For those of you who want to connect with that. The Gene, I guess, is left, or is he still here? I don't know.
Left.
The aerial banner that flew over MetLife Stadium this past Friday, and I thought I heard Gene say that it got 250,000 hits on Instagram. I don't know if that's right or not. I thought I heard him say that, but in other words, it got a lot of play, and
Nice. That
it was
great.
really an important thing because all the eyeballs, over a football game I mean, it made me even more interested in trying to do it on January 7th when the Jets come to play the Patriots here at Gillette Stadium. Whether we could get a banner up over that game. I think that game might be at night. I think Sandra had mentioned it was a 7 o'clock game. I tried to look it up and it didn't say what time it was. So it may nix the idea, but we have to do it during the daylight hours, obviously. So anyway, and anybody that wants to get inspired by the Tea Party, I posted or Sue posted on our agenda the link to the 2006 Tea Party, which was whenever I get down about 9/11, I go back to that, and it was the most exciting thing I ever attended, and it was a lot of fun, and really I think anybody that watches it, would understand who we are, and I mean, it was just a huge event, and so I would recommend going to that if you're interested in the Tea Party in particular. But
So would you like me to send out a mailer there about like the time that we got to meet there, and then the agenda and the maps and all that?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll send it to you, Sue, and then you can forward it to everybody, because I don't really have access to the email list now. I'm not sure
You know
who.
what cats our group are, they don't commit and then they all of a sudden show up. So just let them know where to show up and
Yep.
they may show up.
Well, the same people that I sent last time. Okay.
I'll post it on our website too, so they can see the end of the.
Yeah, because I mean, there's two parts of that to get your bang out. I mean, there's the town hall meeting where they're standing in line,
Right.
but
And
then
then
after
done.
that, there's the actual a theater event where they're looking at a play at the
4-Point channel.
Yeah, and they're all gathered on the shoreline there.
Right. Yeah.
And while they're gathering, you certainly have an opportunity there for like 15, 20 minutes to pass out a lot of flyers where people are just standing there waiting
Right.
performance to begin.
Yeah.
What flyers
So
you are gonna have handy?
The
What's that?
Halsey report and then the lawyers committee.
Yeah, normally the Halsey report flyer is really good about Building 7, and that website is still active. That it points to
And I still have a ton of A&E, the glossy
flyers.
fold-outs that A&E put out. So I still
Yeah.
have those as well.
Good.
So, and I don't know if we mentioned this in the last meeting, but the German structural engineering professor did I get his name wrong? Rupert Maximian?
Yeah, it's Maximilian Rubert.
Oh, okay, that's his last name. All right.
Right.
So that was a really big deal. He came out in support of the 9/11 truth.
Yeah,
And,
the whole thing was in German, but Gene did a pretty good editing job.
Sandra interpreted the whole thing,
Yeah,
so that was good.
yeah. So
And
I think I shared the video with these English.
right.
I shouldn't say subtitles because they were at the top, but it helped. Yeah.
So I don't know if I mentioned Jimmy Dore's upcoming interview with Leroy Halsey. That's going to happen. That's a pretty big deal. He's got a
We
huge
know when
following.
that's happening.
It's what? When it's happening? I don't. But if you go on YouTube and you search for Jimmy Dore, all of his YouTube postings will come up.
Actually, can I just ask? I'm just curious how that Did it come to your attention because of through Jimmy Dore's posting, or how did you find out that he was going to be on there?
I think Gene sent it out. It was on Facebook.
He
And
was interviewing, Jimmy Dore was interviewing someone else. Who was it? And they said during the interview, you should have Leroy Halsey. And he said, we're definitely going to do that.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
I don't remember when that.
Who was he interviewing when Jimmy Dore responded that, yes, we'll definitely do that?
I do not remember.
I don't remember either. I'm sorry
Wow.
to say. But we learned about it on Gene's War Room.
Right, that's
You know
right.
how did he find out through Jimmy Dore? I'm just curious because I didn't even know about that. I hadn't heard that was happening.
Yeah.
It
You'd
was
have
on,
to ask
on
Gene.
Jimmy Dore's show that he was going to have him. You know, so we don't.
Oh, so he didn't know about a date. He just knew about. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
It was suggested during another interview with someone else, and he was
Right.
Jimmy Dore was talking about Building 7 in this interview.
Yeah.
And that's when the person he was interviewing, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, said you should have a Leroy Halsey, and Jimmy Dore said, yes, we'll definitely do that.
Oh, well, that's it. Oh, interesting. Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
Anyway,
definitely.
sorry to interrupt your thing there.
That's
Well,
all right.
we'll sue you. We should have Leroy Halsey as one of our guest speakers.
He's not so inclined to want to talk. I've tried to reach out to him before.
Really? Yeah, no, I understand. He probably wants to be.
He did come to Boston that one time.
At one
Yeah.
time he did, yeah. That was
Yeah.
nice that he did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, regarding Papa, we have another meeting this week, next week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The first Wednesday of the month is our new.
right. And we're still projected to go to Orlando if we can get enough money. I guess that's what it all comes down to. But we were, we have, what is it, every 3 weeks or so, or every month?
What, that we meet?
Yeah, that we meet, yeah,
It's once a month for
Yeah.
now.
for now.
But I
until we
think
get-
as we get closer, it's going to be more frequently,
Right.
you know.
Finally, I think we talked in the war room, or I brought it up, that we really need to reach out to the pro-Palestinians online with 9/11 Truth. Richard Gage is doing an analysis of the similarities between Gaza and 9/11. And I think our audience, there's so much pro-Palestinian press out there right now that we can make inroads into the Palestinian community regarding 9/11 and identifying ourselves with the monstrous things that are going on over there, and how.
Let me just chime in. I mean, doesn't the 9/11 Truth Movement have to be very, very careful not to like blame Israel for 9/11? 100%. I mean, one good way to steer normies away from 9/11 truth researchers to make the statement that Israel did 9/11, which I agree.
You don't have to go there. You can say that the Muslims did not do 9/11.
Right.
I mean, the Muslims have been vilified since 9/11. And we don't have to say who we think did it, but we can certainly prove that it wasn't the 19 hijackers.
Well,
but that encompasses all the Muslim community. Right now you're talking about just the Palestinians, where it seems like the Jews and the Palestinians are fighting each other, and
I'm not fighting any Palestinians.
Yeah,
No,
we got
I
one
just
Jewish
thought you had to be
voice here.
careful. Well, but I guess my question for Craig, have you ever noticed that's a decisive thing in the truth movement, is to blame the Jews for 9/11, which is an effective way to steer people, normies, away from looking into 9/11 because they just think you're an anti-Semite. They don't want anything to do with you.
Well, I would maybe say Israel. I wouldn't necessarily say the Jews. I would say
Right.
there is some evidence that of Israeli involvement.
Oh yeah,
But
there is.
I wouldn't necessarily lead with that. What I find is people often will try to get you to say, well, who did it? Like, if you don't think the government, if you don't think the Muslims did it, well, who did it? And I always sort of come back with that. I don't think that's the first question to ask. I think what we need to do is show that the thing's a lie and that it's not what we've been told, and then that starts everybody on a path to asking that question of who did it. But if you start with, well, no, it wasn't Al Qaeda, it was somebody else, then people will just kind of shoot holes in. They'll try to shoot holes in your alternative theory.
Yeah, but there are people in the movement that really think that Israel was the big mastermind. I mean, they forget to look at evidence like Bandar Bush meeting in the Truman balcony 2 days after 9/11 with the Bushes.
I'd like to say something.
Right.
Maybe both are true.
Right. So
I'd like to say something.
Collective, I believe it's Saudi, US, Israel, even the Brits all collaborated.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It was
so
the
I would just call
globalists.
a Zionist a Zionist.
It was the globalists.
The globalists, right? Yeah, and they had control of these countries.
Well, you're talking about oil and you're talking about a new Suez Canal that runs through Palestine. Those are all reasons for creating the war.
Yep.
And pulling off 9/11.
Mhm.
There's plenty of players involved in 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
But Mossad was definitely a part of it. There's no question
Oh
about it.
yeah.
Yeah. I would agree.
Anyway, I think that wraps up what we were going to bring up for our agenda items. Unless anybody else has anything they want to share for action items. I think we covered what we needed to tonight.
All right. Well, thank you, Al. Thank you, Craig. I think this was an extremely productive meeting.
Thank you for inviting me.
I hope you come back.
I'd be glad to.
Stay on our email list.
Well, I guess I am, since I'm getting I got the agenda and the thing, so I don't know if that means
Oh,
I'm
that
on the
was
list.
because you're the guest.
Oh, because I'm the guest. Okay, well then feel free to put me on the. Is there something I need to do, or do you just do it yourself, or?
No, she can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be
You're
great.
already on the
I'd love to
email
come back.
list, but if you don't want to be notified of future meetings, just let me know.
No, I'd love to be notified, and if just to let you all know too that since we've done the teleconference has now gone Zoom also, that if you want to be on that mailing list and you're not, let me know and I can add you.
Okay.
And I know you're already on there, Sue, and I think and I know Al is about Chris. Maybe you're not, but I can put you on if you like.
Yeah. So Craig, you're always writing articles about 9/11 research. You'll continue to do that, right? And then but you have to look at the truth wherever the truth takes you too. So you might be open to some. I tried sharing with some of my research with you. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but
I did have.
I'd like to talk to you maybe personally sometime about it.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I can expand, because the whole thing about all these researchers together have to come together to share our information, and yeah, I've done a lot of independent research. Yeah.
Great.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It's well past my bedtime. I got to have a work day tomorrow, and I'm going to sit here for 2 hours after this call watching paint dry while the recording downloads.
It's a good thing.
I will add that Adam was quite a guest tonight.
Yeah. Maybe
fascinated by
we'll
what
have
he-
him as a guest in the future.
Yeah,
Well,
Very good.
yeah, you should have. I'm one of the people that works with Adam, so I know his story. So yeah, he would
If
be a
you could
good
share
person.
his- I assume you emailed him because I do not have his email.
Yeah, I did tell him about it.
I
And
have
once
it.
I
I think
found
I
out
have
that,
it, so one of us will get it to you.
Yeah,
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 I can certainly supply that if you needed to.
yeah.
And if you
Good
guys want,
written
if you're open to a Lloyd England presentation sometime in the future,
Yep.
I
Yeah,
know you probably don't want to do that
definitely.
too soon. You had enough of me, but I'm I've got a whole PowerPoint for that I think would be
Well, we're
interesting.
quite ecumenical. We don't shy away from controversy, so we're gonna also have your opponents on. As you know, we've already had David Chandler on. I have no problem with listening to the other side.
No,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, more information is better than less information, and let everyone decide for themselves.
I agree.
So, yeah, certainly. I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, we should
Great.
schedule that for next spring there, Sue, okay?
All right.
Talk about Lloyd England, a whole presentation on that. 'Cause that's very important evidence.
Yes,
Yep, I think so.
very good.
thank
All right.
you again, Craig.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks. I really enjoyed your group, and I'd love to come back just to even not to present necessarily, but just to be on the call because
You're
it's a
more
good
than
group you've got.
welcome just to listen in.
Oh, you're on the list now.
Great. Appreciate it. Appreciate it
All
very
right.
much.
Okay,
You'll
All right.
be
Night,
sorry.
everybody.
Good
Okay.
night, everybody.
good night.
Bye.
Good night.